All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is April 15th, 2025. This meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councillor Wendland.
Here.
Burdick.
Here.
Corrigan. Here. Raff is excused. Afghan is on Zoom. And Imbu.
Here. All right, thank you very much. Now, everyone, will you please stand, remove your hats, and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Miss Masterson, or please come on up to the front and have a. We are going to start our meeting tonight by honoring Miss Laura Masterson. We often use kind of gardening analogies in our roles here. We talk about planting the seeds. We talk about cultivating, the community, growing public trust. We like to use these words. And Laura has done that both literally. She has actually done the growing, the cultivating, and the planting. And she's also, from that work, harvested good community connections and strength that will continue on. So Laura is the founder of 47th Avenue Farm. And we are here to recognize her contributions to the Lusher Farm community-supported agricultural program and her legacy of sustainable agriculture, environmental stewardship, and community engagement in Lake Oswego. Laura began farming in Portland in 1996 when she founded the farm. As she later bought her innovative urban agricultural model, she brought it to Lake Oswego in 2004, over 20 years ago. She partnered with the city's Parks and Rec Department to establish a CSA program at Lusher Farm. And her vision was to create a direct connection between farmers and the community by offering shares of seasonal produce grown locally and sustainably. So now, over these past 2 decades, Laura's transformed Lusher into a working model of ecological agriculture, community involvement, and local food security. As she transitions now away from the farming operations at Lusher, we want to formally recognize her impact on both the land and the community. And I just want to take the time to go over some of the contributions that you have made over these past 2 decades. So first, pioneering the CSA program at Lusher, which is serving over 200 families locally, connecting our residents with local and organically grown food through a membership model. You've managed a 12-acre parcel there at Lusher using regenerative practices such as cover cropping, composting, drip irrigation, and conservation tillage, which enhances both the soil and the ecosystem health. You've provided consistent access to seasonal organic produce for residents and supported the local restaurant economy with high quality ingredients. You have also scaled your model to 50 acres across all 3 counties, all while maintaining a deeply rooted presence in Lake Oswego, demonstrating the viability of urban and suburban farming. And now, unlike many other CSA farms, your 47th Avenue farm offered full-time farm jobs and pioneered techniques such as year-round food production. You've been a strong advocate for soil health, biodiversity, and sustainable food systems, frequently engaging with residents through newsletters, farm tours, and speaking events. And you've also been a leader outside the farm itself, but serving on the Oregon State Board of Agriculture and the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, contributing your small farm perspective to statewide agriculture and environmental policies. Your work exemplifies the balance between community development and farmland preservation, helping inform local land use policy. So on behalf of our community, on behalf of the City Council, Lord, we want to thank you for your 2 decades of great service to the community. Thank you. You've been a large part of it and leave us with a great legacy to move forward with, and we want to give you the chance to say anything if you'd like.
Wow, thank you. I mostly want to just say thank you to the council for making this happen. The city manager, Ivan, and all the park staff were integral to the success of the program. And the Friends of Lusher Farm have made a big contribution and helped the CSA keep going for all these 2 decades. When I started the farm, Judy Hammerstadt was the mayor. And Kim Gilmer was the parks director. And together with that council and 4 mayors, and now Ivan as the parks director, we have, it wasn't just me. It took the whole village to keep it going. I am proud to have employed 250 people over those 20 years. Grown 660,000 pounds of vegetables for the community. Continue to feed folks through COVID and ice storms and the heat dome. Donated thousands of pounds of produce to Hunger Fighters, the local food bank. And so I really am put my heart and soul into the Lusher Farm CSA for the last 20 years. Thanks for providing the opportunity. I'm sad to leave, but I'm also so glad to pass the opportunity on to the new farmers, Sydney and Braden. They were going to be here, but they're out on their tractor making it happen for the upcoming season. So I think you're in really good hands with your new CSA farmers, and I hope you can get out there and visit them this summer. And thank you.
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate everything you've done for the community. Let's everyone please join us in giving Laura a big round of applause. That's great. Thank you. Now, next on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here signed up for public comment? I have, oh, Larry Kitchen, come on down. If there's anyone else here who would like to provide public comment, fill out a blue form in the back and hand it to Ms. Linder. But Mr. Kitchen, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Hello. My name is Larry Kitchen. I've been a commissioner on the Board of Commissioners for the Lake Grove Water District since 2013. I'm speaking tonight on my own behalf since the proposal that the city staff provided at your workshop had not been shared with Lake Grove, and we have not had a board meeting since you reviewed that proposal. I wanted to share a little bit of my background and qualifications to speak about utility issues that I will discuss tonight. I have a Juris Doctorate degree from Willamette University, and I have an undergraduate degree in economics from Stanford University. I worked for the Bonneville Power Administration for 39 years writing wholesale power contracts. I participated in 6 general rate cases as an expert witness on wholesale power rate design. I just wanted to give that background in speaking about the water issues tonight. Lake Grove supplies water primarily to the Lake Forest neighborhood and commercial buildings south of Cruise Way and west of Carmen Drive. Lake Grove has 2 employees and revenues of approximately $1.5 million per year. Lake Grove has 1,271 residential accounts and 104 commercial accounts. Approximately half of our residential accounts are within the city limits, and the other half of our residential accounts are located in the county within the city's urban growth boundary. The district was formed in 1952 and has purchased most of its wholesale water supplies from Portland for 73 years. The district started purchasing water from the city in the 90s when the district's summer needs started to exceed the capacity of Portland's infrastructure. The district has recently determined that it's in the interest of our customers to switch wholesale supply from Portland to the city. Portland's rates are forecast to rise to $6.90 per CCF in 2033-34 from $2.94 per CCF in 24-25. The district believes these forecasts understate Portland's future rates due to the cost of building Portland's water treatment plant and their other investment needs. The district has been discussing how to effectuate this transfer with city staff for the last 18 months and is seeking to negotiate a new contract that would change terms from a surplus contract to a requirements contract where the city would supply the district's needs. On July 1st, 2026, the district plans to increase its city purchase from approximately 20,000 CCF to 83,000 CCF per year. Within 5 years, the district expects to increase its purchase to 170,000 CCF and buy all of its water from the city, except a small monthly amount from Portland that would allow continued use of the district's reservoirs for fire protection needs. In determining our future service, the district hired a consultant to review the city's costs and expected the city to increase its rates by 10% to capture inflation that's incurred since the city last reviewed its rates.
Mr. Kitchen, I'm so sorry. I know you have a lot of information, but we only have 3 minutes for the public comment. We might want to take this conversation offline anyway, so we can discuss it in more detail.
Well, so I guess I would ask you not to adopt Resolution 2503. There are actually, I think, at least 2 mistakes that I saw in the presentation that overcalculate the rates to Lake Grove. And I would actually urge you to keep your existing methodology and find a way that we can actually talk about this. If you adopt the alternative proposal, I think we would be required to probably increase our rates 25% immediately to the ratepayers in our district. And we would have to do that because you'd be our most expensive supplier. You actually are our most expensive supplier now, and we would have to raise our rate to cover the cost of your rate increase. And that would be an immediate rate increase where we've been trying to phase in increased costs without immediately raising rates.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kitchen. Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, then we are moving on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have Resolution 2503, resolution of the council authorizing adjustments to water rates for wholesale water customers. Item 6.2, which is Resolution Resolution 2517. It's a resolution of the council updating the city's financial policies, Sections 6 and 7, shown in Exhibits A and B. We have also Resolution 2519. It's a resolution of the council adjusting the budget for the biennium commencing July 1st, 2023 by transferring certain appropriations. And then approval of meeting minutes from February 18th, March 4th, 14th, and 18th. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion made by Councilor Boop and seconded by Councilor Corrigan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Councilor Afghan, okay, motion passes 6-0. All right. And we also have, okay, sorry, moving on to council business. Okay, item 8.1, this is Resolution 25-07. It's a resolution of the council authorizing the Budget Committee to form a standing committee, the Municipal Grants Subcommittee. And Ms. Thiessen's going to give us a brief summary of this.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilors. I'm Madison Thiesing, the Deputy City Manager. I am here following up from our Budget Committee meeting on March 20th, 2025. At the Budget Committee, the recommendation was to create a Municipal Grants Subcommittee, which allows the authorization of the committee to oversee the city grant programs and then later on allocate the funds. As shared, this was a discussion and made a recommendation from the Budget Committee. In previous years, we had not brought it to council for best practices. We're bringing it to council for formal adoption under a resolution. This is allowing that group of 4, 2 councilors, 2 Budget Committee members to officially begin meeting. Their meetings from now until the ending of the fiscal year will be creating the new structure for the municipal grants. They will come back with a recommendation on how that structure will be in the new fiscal year. So this group, for the time being, will not be allocating dollars. That will come back to council with a presentation. But this is new this year. We've not done it in the past, but wanted to follow best practices of giving authority to a group through city council action.
Great, okay. Does anyone have
Procedural process.
Does anyone have any questions? We all kind of selected the members to serve on this committee at the last Budget Committee meeting, and of course, they're in the resolution itself. Any questions? Comments? All right. Would someone like to make a motion on Resolution 2507?
Move to adopt Resolution 2507.
Second.
All right. Motion's made by Counselor Burdick and seconded by Counselor Boop. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Counselor Afghan. Okay. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Ms. Thiessen. And then we're going to move right into the legislative update. Let's take it away.
Thank you. Now wearing my other hat as chair, I'm Deputy City Manager Masterson, and I am presenting on the 2025 legislative session update. We are, as pointed out in the council report, we're about halfway through session. The bills were required to move out of their first committee last week, which was April 9th, which is the first major deadline. If bills did not move out of their first committee assignment, being the bill where they originated from, then they either are dead or they're moving forward as they had their work session and public hearing. At this point, some of the bills have dropped off. However, many of the ones that we are tracking are still alive. Those are outlined in the council report, structured under housing, transportation, and then general city operations was kind of how I was categorizing things that enhance our ongoing operations, such as police, fire, and sustainability. The big things to note, as I've shared before, we have provided testimony for a handful of the governor's bills. Many of the changes we had requested have been amended in those bills. The big one that we are going to continue to watch is the shot clock timelines, as well as any requirements that limits our ability to require frontage improvements to developments. So two big ones that we're mindful of. And then the last thing I did want to update you on related to housing was we were able to make the technical fix for transferring the city-awarded money to Habitat. If you remember last session, we were awarded $1.7 million for infrastructure as really the middleman from the state to Habitat. Through the contracting process, we found it would be easier if it just went from the state to Habitat. Habitat's able to use the total amount in 2 housing production projects that are both townhomes, actually, one adjacent to Lake Oswego and one within Lake Oswego. So we have fixed that and actually very happy that that's going to move forward on their projects. The other bucket, so housing, like I said, the 2 main things we're going to be looking at is the shot clocks as well as the frontage improvements. The second piece is transportation. The transportation framework has been shared with you all. That is a starting place. It has not been assigned a bill yet, so really it is the first pass of the concepts that might be in it, not yet having negotiated. A lot of the things that are in the framework were things that we were championing for, is a diversifying revenues, so not only gas tax, but vehicles registration, tires, bikes, EV, a whole bunch of different ways we can close the gap on transportation funding. We have started, Will Farley, the assistant city engineer, and myself have been able to be on a first few meetings with the League of Oregon Cities, and then those will continue as this starts to get more narrowed down through discussion. And then lastly, the third bucket is city operations. There's been some bills that have either enhanced what we're already doing. So for example, extending a grant program for fire was one that we'd like to see continue. Having more provisions related to drone use for our law enforcement, that was a continuum. Creating rebate programs for leaf blowers. So there was a lot of bills that we didn't anticipate, but actually really work in as a part of our overall goals for our city. And so we've been advocating for those. And then one thing I did want to note is SB 916, which is the striking bill, that is still in effect. It's moved on to the House. So that's one thing that we're going to continue to push for and be watching. So that's where we're at today, at least. Things are always evolving and changing. And I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone have any questions? No?
Okay, I will see you next month. If anything changes, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Okay, next we are going to move on to our public hearing on Ordinance 2959. This is an ordinance amending LOC Chapter 50, the Community Development Code, for purposes of clarifying and updating various provisions and adopting findings. We call this the annual CDC Code Amendments. We are going to start with a review of the hearing procedure by Ms. Osnack.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Members of council, now is the time set for a public hearing on Ordinance 2959, which is the city's annual Community Development Code update. These updates are a legislative decision, which, as you know, is generally a policy decision which is in your sound discretion. However, in the Community Development Code context in particular, there are applicable state laws, state planning goals, and administrative rules. And particularly for us, this legislative amendment must comply with the applicable provisions of the Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan, and I think you'll hear from the planner and staff tonight that, in fact, they do. The public hearing process will begin by a presentation by Mr. Franstad. Testimony will then be received from the public. Individuals are allowed up to 5 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. The time limit shall not include time taken up by questions from the council or responses to those questions. And any person in attendance may give away his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Now I'll ask if there are any financial conflicts of interest from the council, reminding you all that ex parte contacts or site visits don't need to be declared, and we'll do this I'll just wait, and if anybody needs to make a declaration, please raise your hand and do so, including you, Councilor Afghan. Seeing none, we're ready for the staff report. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Osnek. Mr. Franstad, good afternoon. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Evan Franstad, I'm a senior planner with the Planning Department. And before us today is public hearing for the annual code amendments. We're calling it 2024-2025 because we're in 2025 now. The purpose of the proposed code amendments is twofold, is to correct errors, eliminate text redundancy, and clarify text, and to implement minor policy changes intended to streamline the permit process and implement city goals and priorities consistent with the comprehensive plan. So what I'll cover today is project schedule. We have 16 maintenance items and 7 policy items. I am not going to go over all 16 maintenance items. Those are generally, just to clarify, as I said, they don't involve policy decisions. But if you want me to talk about any of those, just let me know. But I'm going to cover more, get into the 7 policy amendments, including one item that was removed. That was for the middle housing tract and easement discussion. I'll go into more detail on that. We did receive 1 public comment as part of it was submitted right before the Planning Commission hearing, but it's technically for this hearing. It was from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, so it's Exhibit G1. This is covered in the Planning Commission findings. They expressed concerns that the staff report for the Planning Commission staff report didn't address the statewide planning goal for housing. That's Goal 10. The Commission found that Goal 10 is not applicable to these proposed code amendments because they do not affect Goal 10. That is because the amendments do not change allowed residential densities, uses, housing types, comprehensive plan, map, or zoning of any property. So that is the response to that one. All right, so as far as the schedule, here's what has happened before. So we've had 2 work sessions with the Planning Commission. Those were first one was November, then we had one in January. And that's where we discussed generally the code amendments, and we refined which ones would make the list and came forward with the public hearing on March 10th, where the Planning Commission unanimously voted to move forward with the package I'm going to present today, except for one item, which I'll go into more detail. The PC findings were approved on March 24th, which leads us to today, on April 15th. If it's approved today, the findings will be approved on May 6th, and the amendments would go into effect 30 days later. That would be on June 5th. Okay, as I mentioned, there was one item that was removed from after the second work session with the Planning Commission, and this item was brought up last year as part of last year's code amendments, and it's regarding middle housing land divisions and cottage cluster courtyards, or whether the courtyard should be required to be in a tract or an easement. And there was a lot of discussion about this, so this ultimately was removed. And the reason for this is after staff did some initial research and discussion with the Planning Commission, it was determined that, and we reached out to community developers and people who were familiar with the developing cottage clusters, that requiring a tract over an easement was more restrictive and provided less flexibility to development. And really, we have the ability to enforce any encroachments into the courtyard. The concern was that people would be building in the courtyard and it wouldn't be treated as an open space. But our current code allows for enforcement of any encroachments into the courtyard. So as far as enforcement goes, having a tract versus easement doesn't really matter, but there was an argument that having a tract would, it'd be clear where the property lines are. But ultimately, the Planning Commission with staff concurrence agreed that just keep things the way they are and not to require the tract. So the code is not going to change. This item did not move forward. Excuse me. All right, so one of the policy amendments, number 1, had to do with non-conforming historic landmark dwellings. The current code requires the proposed addition or remodel of a non-conforming dwelling that increases floor area by more than 50% or more. Full conformance with the current zone dimensional and design standards is required, and the applicant may choose demolition. This is contradiction to the Historic Preservation Code. One example was a RID that required basically maintain the existing setbacks because the existing house was non-conforming and they were increasing the floor area by more than 50%, so they had to do a variance process. This would fix that. This amendment would add an exception to the non-conforming standards for historic landmark dwellings. To be clear, this doesn't change the historic standards. It just applies to the non-conforming section. Any questions or concerns or comments on this item? I'm going to ask that after each one, because we'll have to vote for the whole package or not, but thank you. Item number 2. So this is reconstruction of non-conforming commercial, industrial, and multifamily non-conforming structures. Previous code amendments unintentionally made the limitation of reconstruction of 50% valuation of existing non-conforming commercial, industrial, or multifamily structures only apply to natural disasters, not removal or demolition of portions of a structure for reconstruction. Currently, regular non-structural maintenance on a non-residential structure is only permitted or the structures can be brought into full compliance with today's code. Staff feels this is overly restrictive and not the intent of the original non-conforming code amendments. This item clarifies that reconstruction of commercial, industrial, multifamily non-conforming structures, less than 50% of the valuation of the structure, including removal or demolition of the structure, is allowed beyond damage caused by natural disasters. Any questions, comments, or concerns about this one? That one's pretty straightforward.
Could you give us an example of something that would fall into that category?
Well, sure. So this is, the way it's written now, it wouldn't allow for just basic, an addition or alteration of the structure unless it was damaged by a natural disaster. So commercial structures, when they want to add an addition or have just basically remodel it, if it's non-conforming, it doesn't allow it unless it was done. So this allows for those additions and things like that.
Okay.
Well, what does it mean damaged or destroyed by any means? What if they destroy it? How's that different than like demolishing it?
Right, so right now it just says it's only by natural disaster. By any means that the property owner could damage it, could remove a portion of it as long as it's not damaged doesn't exceed 50%. So it allows them to keep the non-conforming sections of the building and still upgrade their building over time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's always what we intended.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, item number 3, this has to do with accessory structure setback reduction. So the current code allows setbacks reduction for smaller accessory structures in specific locations. So you can reduce the side setback to 5 feet and the rear setback to 3 feet. The smaller accessory structures must be located at least 40 feet from public street, be separated from other buildings by at least 3 feet. But the main issue with this is the criteria number 3 that says the accessory structure does not exceed a height of 10 feet nor an area of 600 square feet. This is an ongoing issue with violations involving accessory structures placed too close to the rear or side lot lines, not meeting the setbacks. According to the code enforcement staff, a common height for accessory structures is 12 feet, and some of the violators did not understand the standards or did not understand that height is measured from the highest point, usually the peak of the roof. Another issue is the 10-foot height and 6-foot square feet footprint are different than what is referenced in the building code, where a structural permit is not required if a structure is less than 200 square feet and less than 15 feet or less in height. So the building code, when a building permit is required, is different than this exception, what's a reduction to the setback. So there's just two different metrics. One's a building code, one's in the development code. They don't line up. Unfortunately, we can't fix that. We can't change the building code, and we don't think it's appropriate to try to match the development code to the building code. For one reason, the building code measures height differently. It's not to the peak of the roof as the development code does. And really, we don't believe that changing it to meet the building code would limit the number of enforcements or violations. Ultimately, it is up to the people to understand the code. So our solution for this one was that basically twofold. We implement a more effective public communication solution. So we've already made some better handouts that clearly show that, okay, if you want to qualify for this exception, here's the maximum height, here's the footprint, and try to illustrate that in a clearer way. And another part of this is to increase the height to 12 feet, which is, I guess, is a common size, common height for, if you go to Home Depot or whatever, is 12 feet compared to 10 feet, and then hopefully that reduces the number of violations.
So was the violation more the height and not the setback?
Well, they didn't qualify for the reduced setbacks because it was too high.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, garden
sheds.
sheds, just mostly, yeah, but they could be, yeah,
Height was
yeah,
the
right,
issue.
usually they are sheds. Yeah, prefabricated sheds that are common 12 feet tall, but then for over 10 feet now, they don't qualify for that 5-foot side setback or 3-foot rear setback.
yeah.
It's just whatever that zone requires, which varies, but it could be 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, depends.
Right. Yeah. And so is it, the 12 feet is just measured from the height of the roof, from the ground to the roof?
Yeah, the grade to the peak of the roof.
Enough. I don't know how else you would do it.
So if you change the grade, you can have a higher,
No, if you cut the grade, then it's measured from the cut grade.
okay.
Yeah, so it's either existing grade or cut grade.
Okay. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, item number 4 has to do with commercial building design standards. So the commercial building design standards are applicable to all structures, including accessory structures, but most criteria are only applicable to buildings. Staff has previously applied the complementary criterion in the building design standards for all accessory structures, even though they may not be perceived to be traditional buildings. This is a problem because some accessory structures without walls are not perceived as typical building and may not be suitable for design standards geared towards buildings with at least 2 walls and a roof. For example, an accessory structure that may be perceived as a building is a fueling station in the example above. Because this structure only includes support posts and a roof, it is challenging to provide design standards that aren't geared for such a simple structure. However, it does meet the definition of a building per the code. This amendment would clarify how to review accessory structures under the building design standards by adding this type of structure to the building design standards for similar structures such as bus shelters, drinking fountains, benches, mailboxes, things like that. This would also clarify that accessory structures have to be complementary to the primary building design and character. Any questions, comments? No? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, this one is a fairly straightforward one. It's for Middle Housing Land Division. It clarifies when Middle Housing Land Division applies. So currently, the Middle Housing Land Division are subject to the same development standards as other land divisions. They're actually not called out, just a partition or subdivision, any land division. So everything that applies to those applies to Middle Housing Land Divisions, even though the purpose of Middle Housing Land Division is just for ownership purposes. It's not for development. So it's almost like a condominiumized, if you don't know what it is. and you can't further divide it, it's just for ownership purposes. It's not to increase the density has already been provided. So the use of the phrase land division is problematic to a number of standards that are applicable but should not be. Staff recommends clearing that it's clearly stated in the applicable sections for each standard that do not apply for the middle housing land divisions. So in attachment 2 in the materials, it goes through all the ones that it clearly states that middle housing land divisions don't apply to. So like access standards, because they're not changing the access. It's intended for, I guess if I should give you an example, they can happen in different ways, but so you have a subdivision, they can come in, they can build like a quadplex. They can come back and do a middle housing land division and create 4 lots within that one lot. That's just for ownership purposes. They can't further divide it. But the access has already been provided, the density has already been provided, that quadplex is already there. So those standards that technically our code says apply now, this would clarify that they don't. Clear. Okay. Any questions or comments?
No.
Item number 6 has to do with generators and variances. There have been multiple pre-application conferences requested to locate generators in required yard setbacks. All requests have been required to have a major variance due to reduced setbacks are proposed, which seems extreme for the type of structure with challenging criteria and requires a public hearing in front of the Development Review Commission. In researching other city standards, staff could not find any specific location requirements for generators except in relation to telecommunication facilities. Generators are typically treated as the same as other mechanical equipment or accessory structures. Some cities do not have setback requirements for mechanical equipment, only screening standards. Some cities allow reduced setbacks for mechanical equipment as long as certain screening standards are met. Some cities have some kind of variance that can be applied if necessary. Staff did not find another city that required a major hardship variance for generators or mechanical equipment. No research city had specific noise or fume standards for generators, except in relation to telecommunication facilities. Staff recommends adding a minor variance classification specifically for setbacks related to the placement of generators. The reasoning is that generators can run temporarily during power outages or during normal maintenance cycles, where the units temporarily turns on, which would have a limited impact to surrounding property owners compared to other mechanical equipment such as heat pumps or AC units, which can run continuously. Please note this option would not limit the setback reduction to 20% or less, which is common for minor variances. This would allow potentially more than 20% reduction. But it does require an analysis of public health and safety, material injury to surrounding properties, impact to streetscape, impacts to physical or natural systems. Minor variances involve a minor development application that requires a pre-application conference and public notice with a 14-day public comment period. The staff decision would be appealed to the DRC, and a public hearing is not required. So this is really just to create an easier variance process for generators because the major variance process is fairly restrictive.
Why are people locating them away from the house? They just don't have the room.
Yeah, a lot of these.
And it's not for
Yeah,
noise.
that's kind of a yeah.
Oh, they're non-conforming? Okay,
Well-
it's not to push the noise off onto their neighbor or anything.
No, I don't think intentionally. A lot of these, the requests have been along the lake where they are built out. The houses are built to all the setbacks. So they meet the standards the house does, but it doesn't leave any room to place a generator because those
That's a
setbacks.
big generator, too.
That is the biggest we've seen. So that's
huge.
But it is screened from the street. That's along the street, and it wouldn't impact anybody, those surrounding properties, really. But yeah, that would have required a major variance with the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions on that? Councilwoman?
So that this is going to be a lot less restrictive.
Less restrictive.
It is less restrictive. Yeah, the minor variance criteria are easier to meet than major
Right.
variance.
Something.
They still have to get a permit, and they still,
It's still a land use application.
right.
Yep.
I think it's, one of the issues is cost. You could spend a lot of money for the generator, and you can spend 3 times the amount getting installed follow all the different criteria that we have, you might have to put it way in your backyard, and that's very expensive. And so, I mean, I think we're trying to encourage people to be a nice, safe, disaster reactive community, and if we put too many stop-ups, we get issues. So glad that this is less restrictive.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so this is the most complicated one. It's the last item. So this is another item that came up from last year's code amendments. The definition of detached. So during the 2023 annual code amendments, the City Council approved an amendment to clarify the definition of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes to assure the units were physically attached along a common wall. 25% was approved. During the hearing, some councilors discussed that the definition of detached was confusing. City Council directed staff to research the definition of detached and see if it could be further refined as part of this annual code amendment. The definition of detached requires a horizontal separation of 3 feet or more between the subject structure and nearby structures. For example, if a garage is less than 3 feet from the primary structure, measured eave to eave, then the garage is considered an addition to the primary structure. This is important when determining which setbacks, maximum floor area, and lot coverage calculations apply. The definition of detached was created in 2013. The staff commentary noted that the purpose of this definition is to require a separation distance that is meaningful in terms of visual separation between structures, and that 3 feet is a distance separation for structures by the building code without firewall requirements. Staff also noted that requiring the 3-foot separation would prevent two buildings from being detached technically and therefore benefiting from the accessory structure setbacks for one of them while appearing visually as a single mass because they could be only inches apart. Staff finds that the definition of each specific housing type with the 2023 annual code amendments, the general definition of detached only applies to accessory structures, not between housing dwelling units. Staff is proposing two options to refine and provide clarity on when an accessory structure is attached versus detached. So option number one, staff is to remove the definition of detached and add language to the definition of accessory structure to require no structural connection to the primary structure, excluding breezeways, et cetera. Staff finds the definition of detached is confusing for the public to apply and for staff to administer. It is counterintuitive to define a structure as attached when there's no physical connection between the structures. Staff has experienced difficulty when applying the definition of detached with measuring the distance between structures from eave to eave, which are often at different heights. Other considerations are that the resulting development includes a 3-foot area between the two eaves that is mostly unusable space, often paved, and limits development on constrained sites. The minimum 3-foot separation is commonly used when accessory structures in order to qualify for reduced rear yard setbacks and bonuses to maximum lot coverage and floor area. For example, the rear yard setback for a primary structure in the R10 zone is 30 feet, compared to 15 feet for an accessory structure. Conversely, the definition can be used to attach an accessory structure to take advantage of the primary structure allowances. For example, an attached garage to a second floor is not limited to the maximum 600 square feet area required for an accessory structure over 15 feet in height. So there's certain standards that there's maximum size for an accessory structure, but if you attach it, it doesn't apply. But if accessory structure is detached, then you can have less setbacks. You can get a bonus for lot coverage and floor area. So there's different ways that they interconnect. No other city research uses the 3-foot separation metric to define attached versus detached. Staff submits that the minimum separation of 3 feet is not sufficient distance to truly provide a meaningful visual separation between the structures. Option 1 fixes the confusion by requiring structural connection that is common requirement used by other cities, which will be familiar to builders and architects, but not requiring the 3-foot separation. There are more building layout options on smaller sites and the option to provide covered areas under building eaves for walking between structures. It would have to meet the building code fire separation standards. So if they didn't have firewalls, they couldn't be more than, they'd be at least 3 feet apart. Or they could have firewalls and they could push them together. And of course, they'd still have to meet all the standard setbacks.
Okay, so option one,
Option
to
one,
do away with this definition, just say there's no structural connection, but you're saying within these other requirements, like the fire code, it's still, that's where we're getting that 3-foot minimum separation from. They still have to meet that or provide additional safety features, firewall.
right,
Okay,
that's correct.
if they wanted to push them closer. But is there a benefit to keeping it, if you're so close, why would you not just attach it?
Well, the way the current code is, it allows, if it's no structural connection and it is detached, then you can get a bonus for you can get less for rear yard setback, you can get a bonus for maximum floor area and to lot coverage.
A bonus for the accessory structure
Yes,
if it's not attached?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, so part of it has to do with how the dimensional standards are laid out, and they differentiate between accessory structures or garages and the primary structure. And maybe that's more what the discussion should be, about how why is there different setbacks for an accessory structure, a garage, versus the house? Is that necessary? That's not what we're doing today, but that could be what we do in the future. So it is confusing, but
So what's the maximum size of a garage accessory?
depends on the height.
It depends on the height.
Yes, so if it's 18 feet or less, it's 600 square feet. If it's over 18 feet in height, it's 800 square feet. If they attach it, it's just the maximum floor area for the lot.
Okay, so if it's detached, it's totally separate from the floor area calculation for the.
Well, it still has to meet, the maximum floor area still applies for the lot.
Oh, okay.
But for accessory structures, it's either 600 or 800 square feet max.
But they could be, if it's detached, they could be getting a different setback than if it was attached.
Right.
And it could get, and what's the bonus?
Well,
The square footage?
I think for maximum lot coverage, I think it's 200 square feet, get an extra 200 square feet. I forget what it is for floor area. It could be around there too. So you get an
And
extra,
what's the rationale then there? Like, what's the?
to break up building massing, to provide the meaningful separation. So if you are providing two different structures
I see.
that are as
So
long
we're like
as-
encouraging.
Yes, it does encourage accessory structures.
Okay. And that was when we created this, that was the community's intent, was to encourage accessory
Yes.
structures.
So those bonuses, that would still be in the code. It just wouldn't require the 3-foot separation.
But you're saying that otherwise they would still need the 3-foot or some other.
Without firewalls, yes. If
Okay.
you
And
would have to have
why was
firewalls.
getting rid of the 3-foot separation? Why is that a good idea?
It allows more flexibility for builders or property owners on constrained sites. And it allows them to, if they do want to have the 3-foot, they could do the building eaves and have a covered walkway with the eaves themselves, which right now, because the 3-foot separation is measured from eave to eave, they can't do. It allows them more flexibility to use that 3-foot area if they want, or they don't have to do it at all.
But I guess I'm confused. The purpose of allowing the bonus was to separate the massing. And if they're just so close that.
It does not do that.
Then it doesn't do that,
No.
then I don't see why we would give them, and I know we're not deliberating now, but just, that's what I'm wondering, why we give them the bonus if we're doing that to encourage the accessory structure, but the structure's so close to the main structure that it might as well be one, then we're not really meeting that objective, I guess.
And that's one reason why we have two options.
Oh, okay,
And this is
we got option two.
very similar conversation what we had at the planning commission. And they're wondering, why don't we require more than 3 feet?
I think we
Let's-
should have brought in some like Legos
Yeah, it's kind
for
of,
this.
unless you deal with this every day and you look at all the plans like we do, it can be a little
Things
confusing.
to
But
touch here.
so I go on to option number 2.
Item number 2. Door number 2. Door number 2, yes, 2
Door
doors.
door number 2 is a lot simpler. It just adds in, it clarifies that detached applies to accessory structures.
Keeps it 3 feet.
It keeps the 3 feet. Right, it would eave to eave, so if you would have, you partially walk in the rain at those, and then,
But that 3 feet was the existing standard that we've had up until this point.
Right, it doesn't change that. Yeah, at that time, when they adopted that, they thought that that was a meaningful separation. I think staff has found it's not. But, another part of this, and was discussed at the Planning Commission, is that we are going to be looking at, we're going to be doing a code audit to look at barriers to housing. And maybe this is something that we look at as part of that project. Maybe this requires a more in-depth analysis of our dimensional standards and beyond just the definition of detached.
Mm-hmm. Questions on this one? So, you have a question? No.
Okay, so that,
Oh, yeah, Councilman.
So how does this go in relationship to ADUs? That is a completely different set. That's not considered an accessory structure?
they can be. So it depends if they're within the house or not, but yeah, most of the time they are accessory structures. So yes, it applies to them. And usually what we find is that, so back to the 600 or 800 square foot max for accessory structures, that's not enough for what they want to do. Usually it's, what we see is, they want to put an ADU on the second floor of a garage, but the garage floor area counts. So they, more often than not, they end up attaching the garage to the house because they don't have that 600 or 800 square foot limitation. But yes, it does apply to ADUs.
Okay. Thank you.
But you don't get the bonus for an ADU?
No.
No, because it's limited to 800.
Unless
Right,
it's
for
over
the-
12 feet. No, just kidding.
Right, you cannot go over 800 square
high.
feet for an ADU. That's correct. Okay, unless there's other questions, that concludes my presentation.
Councilor Corrigan.
I just have a quick question back on the code maintenance items. I noticed on number 11, you say clarify that the type 2 tree removal and mitigation standards are applicable to minor and major development permits, but not the tree protection standards. I was confused by that. Can you give me a little more information on why tree protection standards wouldn't apply when you have the rest of that? What am I missing?
Trying to remember about this one. It's been a while since I've had to discuss it. Yeah, so this came about from a Development Review Commission tree appeal finding that the current code reference to tree cutting chapter 55 does not include tree protection. That to codify the interpretation, the reference to tree cutting chapter 55 should be removed and replaced with removal, and specifically reference the tree removal standards in chapter 55.02 to make it clear that tree protection does not apply. So tree protection is not a development standard. I think that's the crux of this, and that it shouldn't, it still complies to construction, but yeah, this just clarifies a prior DRC finding.
So there is still tree protection, it's just not a development standard. Is that right? Okay.
Clarify. Jessica Numonaloo, Community Development Director. What it means is that it's not an applicable criterion. So when tree protection is a condition of approval, it's something that applies to any sort of construction that requires a permit. So I guess what we're just clarifying is it's not an approval criterion for a minor or major development permit. But it is still required when they go to construction and apply for their permit. They have to obtain a tree protection permit before they can proceed.
Great. Okay, thanks.
I had just a procedural question of, in the ordinance, which one of these options, 1 and 2, going back to the detached thing, how do we have the ordinance drafted?
Well, you'll need to
including-
decide, staff finds that either option meets the comprehensive plan criteria,
Okay.
so you get to pick which one you
Oh,
want.
okay, so you need to hear from, okay.
Sorry, the Plan Commission recommendation was option number 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's great. We'll hear our public comment. Maybe people want to talk about it. I don't know. Okay. Any other questions right now? We'll come back to questions too, so. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. If you're here for this hearing and haven't yet filled out one of these blue forms in the back, please go ahead and do so and hand it to Ms. Linder. But first up is Carol Lockhart. Ms. Lockhart, come on down. Good afternoon. Many of you have been here before, but you just, when you, and good afternoon, Ms. Lockhart, just, state your name. You don't have to give us your address or anything like that, but just your name for the record and then dive right in. Oh, you got a presentation.
Good evening, or good afternoon. Carol Lockhart, speaking as the Land Use Liaison for Fan Forest Hills. So 10 minutes. I'm going to talk first about cottage clusters and the neighborhood's request to require that the common courtyard be put in a separate tract. As staff said in the first work session, this was brought forward by one of our neighborhoods. Now listen to staff at the beginning of the Planning Commission public hearing. Staff starts out explaining that if a common courtyard is placed into a separate tract, building code requires either a 3-foot setback or a firewall. And then staff takes an unexpected turn. Staff quote, "If you required a tract, the cottages would either have to be 3 foot back or include firewalls, and the developers and people who had experience with it, developing cottage clusters, felt that that was overly restrictive, and they encouraged us to keep the code as is to allow the most flexibility. So, for the record, that's why we removed it from the agenda, and we're not talking about it tonight." End quote. Wow, brought forward by a neighborhood, developers told staff they didn't like it, end quote. So for the record, that's why we removed it from the agenda, and we're not talking about it tonight, end quote. This has gone too far. You need to put a stop to this privileged relationship between staff and developers. And now you know why there was a public hearing at Planning Commission with no public participation. Seriously, why would we? And then staff goes on to explain more. Quote, "Until things become more solidified and settled with regard to housing and what's happening at the state legislature, we just don't think it's the right time to be making those changes." End quote. But the council's stated public position is home rule, and yet staff is telling Planning Commission to hold and wait for more Salem directives. Which is it? And even though staff wants us to hold off on fixing our code, dozens of residents in your city council chamber on February 18th and today, coping with supercharged density, think it's well past time. City Council, you told them on February 18th that you agreed that changes needed to be made. City Council comments quoted in the Lake Oswego review, "We hear you, we feel your pain. Many of us did not agree with the cottage clusters, but it was what the state was telling us we had to do. We tried to mitigate to the best of our ability all that we could. Salem is making these decisions. Lake Oswego is not," end quote. Well, it is true that Salem has made most of the middle housing decisions, and then after HB 2001, Salem added the Climate Friendly Act, and that undercut Lake Oswego's parking code, and things got worse. Because no parking was provided on the cottage cluster site in first edition, even more cottages than code originally intended were squeezed onto the lot. But here are some home rule code options you can consider today. 2 code options that you can do right now to reduce density and improve livability on cottage cluster sites. The first one, require the common courtyard to be in a separate commonly held tract. Remember what staff said? 3 foot back from the edge of the tract. Well, it's simple geometry. If you have to push the cottages surrounding the courtyard back 3 feet and the rest of the setbacks preset by Salem stay the same, you reduce the number of cottages that will fit on the site. The extra 3 feet between the cottage and the courtyard in the commonly held tract also improves the lived environment for the cottage residents by creating a better communal recreation open space experience for the cottage residents. And in case you're feeling worried, will Salem let us? Here is a staff quote from the first PC work session relating to either tract or easement. Quote, "We know from DLCD that they don't have a strong opinion either way." Regarding confusion and problems over ownership of the common courtyard, our city legal department states, quote, "If properties are in a tract, nobody thinks they own it," end quote. But with regard to easements, quote, "subject to an easement with everybody's right to use, people think they own it," end quote. The City of Portland's planning department had a comment on easements, quote, "Most choose easements. Consequently, we have seen multiple types of encroachments in the common open space. Fences or hedgerows splitting up the space, decks and trash enclosures," end quote. Yep, what a mess for Lake Oswego's code enforcement to deal with year after year. Our legal department says that if property is in a tract, quote, "it avoids the conflict between the property owner who has the courtyard on it versus all the others." The legal department staff quote continues, "That's why staff believes a tract for common area is a better tool for property owners so they don't think they own what they don't," end quote. Thank you, so well stated. Now, here is the second code fix that was within your home rule power. Set a minimum footprint size for cottages. Salem allows that option, but Lake Oswego has not taken advantage of it. Again, simple geometry. Larger footprint, developer can't cram in as many units. Salem says that a cottage footprint must be less than 900 square feet. The 8 cottages in the Fan development have 500 square foot footprints. But if these footprints were required by our code to be at least 850 square feet, the developer could not have fit 8 cottages onto that lot. Originally, code required 1 on-site parking space per cottage. Instead of providing parking on-site, the developer is shoehorning more units onto that lot than you originally intended. Rebalance the site equation. Set the minimum footprint at 850 square feet for these dwellings. Time matters. Today, during this public hearing, direct staff to notice and enact this minimum footprint code. How many more developers will you allow to submit their applications under our substandard current code? You can see from the Fan example what will continue to happen if you don't adopt the 2 code fixes I have covered in my testimony. This city's residents need help now. You can adopt the common courtyard tract tonight and direct staff to fast-track the 850 square foot minimum cottage footprint code. Give them a short timeline, hold them to it. Shifting briefly to policy item 7, the language in the code staff wrote to describe common wall attachment for middle housing during last year's code updates created confusion relating to how we use the term. Detached. Option 2 for policy item 7 removes the confusion. For many years, our code has been providing floor area and lot coverage bonuses when an accessory structure is 3 feet or more from the primary structure. Have a look at some of the great designs our code has incentivized. These lovely homes are all along the E Avenue corridor. From classic to modern, our code has driven the building of innovative plans. This practice will continue if you adopt option 2 for policy item 7. Unfortunately, option 1 would upend this practice by giving floor area and lot coverage bonuses even if the detached structure is detached by only 3 inches. That is ridiculous. So keep good design intact. Direct staff to implement option 2 for policy item 7. That's what Planning Commission voted for 7-0 unanimously. So there you have it. Home rule action that Salem does allow to mitigate middle housing impact in neighborhoods. You are the City Council. This is your call. This is completely up to you. Oh, and as some of you may know, I also chair the Neighborhood Chairs Committee. The Willows, Lake Oswego's latest lovely multifamily complex on Meadows Road, with most of the 165 units still available, already Lake Oswego's housing production numbers coming in, graciously hosted our March NCC meeting. And at that meeting, the NCC unanimously adopted the same 3 positions. Number 1, direct common courtyard in its own track held in common ownership. Number 2, set an 850 square foot minimum cottage footprint. And number 3, adopt policy item 7, option 2. And to reiterate, put a stop to this privileged relationship between staff and developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. All right, next up is Chris Durkee. Good afternoon, Mr. Durkee.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, city manager, staff, it's fun to be back. I'm Chris Durkee, 2356 Glen Haven Road, and I'm the chair of the Palisades Neighborhood Association, so I'm also a member of the Neighborhood Chairs Committee, and in that capacity, I'm speaking today. I support wholeheartedly the position that Carol outlined. I want to speak to one issue specifically, and that's the common courtyard. When the cottage cluster concept was developed, the idea was to have a shared yard, so we don't have my front yard, my backyard, your front yard, your backyard. That allowed greater density, which allowed more affordability. It's actually a pretty cool building type, and we see that now going on in town. We have a large project in Palisades that's moving ahead that involves, I think, about 23 cottages in clusters. So the issue is, what do we do with this courtyard? What's the legal ownership and treatment of that courtyard? The concept is that it's a common courtyard shared by all the cottages. If the developer is allowed to split that courtyard up like a pie and assign some of those slices to some of the cottages, it will create a sense of ownership by those cottage owners, which violates the whole concept of this common courtyard. How sad it would be to hear in an otherwise beautiful common courtyard somebody shout at a couple of kids, "Get off my lawn." So I encourage the council to establish that the courtyards in a cottage cluster should be owned in common as its own tract. Allowing it to be split up creates all kinds of unintended consequences involving maintenance, use, access, and other issues. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Durkee. So succinct. Thank you so much. Stacy Hauser, you're next. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Oh, thanks. Hi, my name is Stacy Hauser. This is not the first time that I've come to speak on the 233 E Avenue and 310 G Avenue Cottage Cluster topic. I live in the First Edition neighborhood. So we've met previously. You've mentioned previously during those discussions when I've come to speak at the Lake Oswego City Council meetings that City Council's hands are tied and that you would do something if you could. From what I understand, you can do something now. Before I proceed, a quick word about construction that's already in progress. Both lots are in the process of being clear cut, trees raised, and construction garbage is everywhere. Roads are blocked consistently and recycling isn't getting picked up. It's loud, it's messy. Further, the foundation plots are laid the foundation lots laid so far are so small and smashed together, it's hard to imagine that any leader in any forum would consider what's developing as consistent with the look, feel, and character of one of the oldest neighborhoods in Lake Oswego. I'm hoping we can salvage something from this situation based on prior presentations during this forum today. I'd request that the City Council strongly consider, number one, work with the neighborhood to identify solutions, not the builders, the neighborhood, your constituents. Number two, require direct common courtyard in its own tract held by common ownership. Number three, set a minimum footprint size for cottages. Candidly, I'm a bit surprised that we had to come to you and mention this. It feels like something you guys could have figured out maybe on your own. It does a bit. I think Carol mentioned 850 square feet. Number 4, work with Salem to identify an acceptable solution to parking requirements and limitations. I do feel like Oswego is in a unique position to do this, kind of being hit by both ends. It feels like something you guys could just call Salem and just ask them about, just work maybe a bit more collaborative, just my own opinion. And then number 5, finally, please do put a stop to the privileged relationship between the staff and its builders. It's pretty clear and apparent, and it's a bit disarming, honestly. You guys are laughing at me, but that's okay. I'm fine with that. And then finally, please please strongly consider our suggestions, and thank you for your time. Any questions at all? Do you guys have questions, or was that funny? Okay.
And Deborah Link. E. You're up.
Camp bed for 3 nights with my daughter, our granddaughter at Girl Scout camp, and I'm a little stiff still.
Oh, no. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
See you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Buck, councilors, and staff. My name is still Deborah Link, and I am a resident of First Edition. I have been attending the First Edition Neighborhood and Forest Hills Neighborhood Association board meetings. The board talks city code. They understand our city code, and they see a path forward that will improve cottage cluster developments in Lake Oswego. Carol Ockert has been leading discussions on code not only for our neighborhood, but for the Neighborhood Chairs Committee, which represents a large number of your voting constituents. Carol has identified actions that you, City Council, can pass that will improve cottage cluster development. You don't have to wait for special permission from Salem for these code improvements. You can do this right now. I remind you that at the February 18th council hearing, you told me and my 65 neighbors and friends sitting in the audience that we had to go to Salem for any relief. And we kept our part of the bargain and supported you by writing numerous letters regarding proposed legislation based on your position. Now it's your turn. You can take action now to improve cottage clusters. I remember clearly that you said you would if you could. Well, you can. And you can do it now. Keep your word when you told us, your citizens, at the public hearing what you believed in. Show us some of the home rule action you say you support. Enact the code that the First Edition Forest Hills Land Use Liaison has put in front of you today. Support the code the Neighborhood Chairs Committee supports. Specifically, and you've heard this several times, first, require cottage cluster common courtyards be held in common ownership in a single tract. Second, set a minimum cottage footprint to 850 square feet. Third, select option 2 for policy item 7 that clarifies detached applies to accessory structures. You can make a really positive difference for your community. Today is your chance to do the right thing for your citizens. And as our favorite neighbor to the north says, just do it.
Thank you, Ms. Link. Is there anyone else here who would like to testify for the hearing? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll have Mr. Franstead come back up. I'll just, these are, getting into the code can be challenging, and I will say it's, when you all bring us, amendments and things, like literally to the meeting, and I'm talking to the folks, who testified, because I appreciate your comments. It is just challenging. We're hearing it for the first time in the public hearing. I don't understand why no one sends us an email or tries to get together outside of, I can just tell you it's very difficult for us to do anything in the hearing when it's gone through the Planning Commission and it's here. So I think we could improve the engagement there if you do want to see things done. Coming to the hearing with it fresh to the council is probably not the way to do it. And also denigrating the city staff is definitely not the way to do it. And I do not appreciate those comments at all. You can have disagreements on the policy, but when you come in and denigrate the staff, it doesn't sit well with me. All right, so council. I would ask, Evan, do you mind talking to us a little bit about this footprint idea that's been brought up? What do we know about this footprint?
Are you talking about the
850
square feet?
What is that?
So the current, I can answer that if you don't mind, Evan. The current code allows or requires no greater than a 900 square foot, which aligns with current state statute requirements. I will note that HB 2138 includes a provision that completely removes the 900 square foot limitation and just redefines a cottage cluster as basically an attached or detached or attached unit. So they're now going to allow cottage clusters, if the bill passes, as well as triplexes and quadplexes to be attached or detached. We can talk about that more, but that's something that you just, as a council, required plexes to be attached last year. So lots of things happening, unfortunately, in the state legislation. In addition, HB 2138, until about, I would say in the last month or two, had a provision where they were going to change the courtyard requirements. They were going to allow courtyard or amenities, which weren't defined yet. It seems that has since been removed from the bill. I don't know if it will come back, but that was another reason why staff was not keen on making another change to our code that might be overridden by the state yet once again. But as far as the 850 square foot limitation that has been suggested, I have to say this carefully. Having minimum size requirements, such as minimum lot sizes, minimum sizes of homes, is a way to be exclusionary with housing, okay? It's a way for you to limit, to make the house or the lot be a certain size so that it will limit development or limit the people that could live there or the income of the folks that could live there. So that is a traditional way that unfortunately zoning has been exclusionary, zoning regulations. I will say in the current HB 2138, they are adding provisions that prohibits the cities from requiring a minimum, oh gosh, I have to find that section in here. Within an urban growth boundary, a city may not adopt a land use regulation that decreases the overall allowable or required density or residential development or creates additional limitations on allowed housing types that effectively reduces allowable or required density, except as necessary to comply with statewide planning goals. And then it goes on to say that we cannot put limits on the allowable units per acre, per developable lot. We cannot put limits that reduces floor area ratios for dwelling units, reduces allowable height, or additional limitations, I should say, or increases minimum lot sizes, or increases setbacks or otherwise limits developable area of a lot or parcel. Now again, this has not been adopted yet, but this is something that is currently pending with the state. Right. So that is what I would say about the 850 square foot limitation. If that's something the council would like to look into, we certainly can do that for the council. It's not something that we can just tack on here and approve tonight. It's something we would have to provide notice to, but I also want you to be aware of what's happening at the state legislature.
Right. And that's in the most recent dash of the bill, yeah. Right. Because that's been through, I think, 3 iterations now.
Correct.
With lots of feedback from the cities and the LOC. Yeah, okay. That makes good sense. You don't have any questions on that?
Yeah,
Councilor.
my question was about the common courtyard that they raised. I think Evan, I think at that time I was in the planning commission, and can we develop that? Like, why don't we do a common courtyard rather than like just saying, what did we say last time? I wanted to make sure that you respond to that question even.
I wasn't here for that discussion, but so it is a common courtyard right now. And the code requires it can be an easement or a tract. It's the developer's choice. So it's always going to be common. It's always going to be, there's easement language that requires it to be shared among the cottages. Right now, we haven't had any middle housing land division for cottages actually recorded and developed. All the cottages they're referring to do not include middle housing. The the courtyards are going to be in tracts. Sorry, not tracts, they're going to be in easements. We cannot require a tract without a middle housing land division.
Okay.
So it doesn't fix the problem that they're talking about.
Okay.
Tract requires a middle housing land division.
Yeah.
Yes, it requires a land division, and that is recorded as a plat recorded at the county. So that, yeah, tract cannot be required unless they choose that option, and developers so far haven't been choosing that option.
Is there a difference in the kind of governance of the cluster if they do the middle housing land division and have a tract versus the easements like a HOA versus no HOA, or is it the same either way?
We don't require an HOA, and I don't believe we can require an HOA for either a tract or easements. However, regardless of whether it's in a tract or an easement, all of the property owners will be responsible for the maintenance of the tract. And I know Evan has opined on this. I don't know that I could, I can substitute for him, and probably Ellen is not ready on the spot to do that. But from a legal standpoint, in terms of how the tract has to be maintained and governed, it's the same whether it's an easement or a tract. So, and from a staff standpoint, I will say this. Will it be more potentially easier for us to enforce? I believe it would, because I think that Ms. Ockert is right, that if something is in an easement, or excuse me, in a tract, it is clearer to folks where their property line begins and ends versus an easement. We typically see this being a bigger problem where we have had in planned developments where you have much larger lots, and there's an easement that's on the backyard of a particular property that's, say, a sensitive lands easement, or it's an open space easement. We've had both of those situations. And you have this private property owner, we will see encroachments happening in there. But it's hard to say if that's going to be as big of a problem on a tight site, because it is readily visible to everyone. It's much easier for us to enforce because we can see it, because we're dealing with a smaller lot. You can see what's happening there, versus if it's in a backyard of somebody's with a large lot, we can't see those encroachments. But they're also happening in tracts, open space tracts too. We have plenty of examples of that, as well as our own park system where we have a lot of people.
Well, now, so who owns, with the easement, it's clear, the ownership is divided, but who owns the tract?
The tract is commonly owned by all of the cottage cluster owners.
Okay.
And the easement, while it's part of that lot, is still under it's still accessible and must be maintained, and is the responsibility of all owners of the cottage clusters.
Yes. Well, I'm assuming that, the way that, and again, we haven't seen anything, but the way that the design of it itself seems to kind of delineate the properties. It's not, no one's starting from scratch, moving there, and they're not each building their own. It's a single development, right? So it's, kind of.
But
they're delineating the common courtyard, right? It's designed to be a common courtyard. It's going to look like a common courtyard.
From the outside, you're not going to be able to tell where the different property lines are. Anybody walking out there, regardless of whether it's easements or a courtyard. Right. So the question is, it's really for the homeowner. I think that's what the testimony has been, is that it might be confusing to the homeowner. They may be tempted to overtake that as part of their own yard because it's an easement on their lot. So I think that is the concern. And that might be a valid concern. I mean, it does take away flexibility. That's something we were talking about. When you've got a cottage cluster site, it's pretty tight. When you have to have setbacks, you may have trees on there. We've had cottage clusters where they've actually been able to save trees. We've seen one where not so much. But certainly that's another flexibility that's being taken away. But again, could either of them work? Yes, either of them could work.
And in either way, it's enforceable. If
Yes.
someone does encroach.
Correct.
There's action their neighbors could take or the city could take. City? No? No. Okay. Councilor Willen.
Well, I don't really care what Salem is doing. I think we need to put our best foot forward, frankly. I think earlier, was it this month? I guess it was last month. On the 31st, I said home rule matters. And I think we helped design, we decided as a council and as a city to go down the path of having staff write our reaction to House Bill 2001. We didn't have to go through the exercise and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of staff time to have the state tell us what to do. We chose to do everything we can to try to maintain the character of Lake Oswego. I guess one of my, whatever we can do to, I think, get the end result. I like the cottage cluster, courtyard, common area idea. I spent part of my life in California, and I've seen developments that do go wrong when you allow individuals to make up their own decisions. And it's not pretty, and it devalues everyone's space. And so I think we need as many tools in the toolbox to maintain those common courtyard areas consistently so that everybody joins together. And in fact, that was one of the selling tools when they did House Bill 2001 and cottage clusters, was that it was going to be a nice little community for everybody to be, you know, kumbaya. So I think we need to follow that direction. I know the state's probably going to come down and take away any home rule that we ever have. I think they're heading in that direction. It's too bad, but I think anything we can do to try to prevent maybe a complete change. And you and I have to have coffee because I need to understand the, when you say that we're limiting options for public or for the thing that you said so eloquently about that we're discriminating against people on housing.
Exclusionary, yeah.
Exclusionary.
Housing.
I get that, but isn't code exclusionary? I mean, everything that we have, I can't build additional things on my house, on my lot, because you've told me that I can only cover so much of my lot. I mean, we put in rules all the time, and so I guess I look at it as, I'm not trying to be exclusionary. I'm trying to say this is Lake Oswego values, and this is what we have put together over the course of the last 10 decades to build Lake Oswego in a certain way. And we've invested time, energy, and people have made investments from a property standpoint of view. And I think it's in fairness to people who have most of their money tied up into a house. They have expectations that we're going to try to keep the community in a similar way. Yes, do we have to put multiple housing in certain ways and duplexes and so on? But I think that's why we spent all the time with duplexes and fourplexes and triplexes to say they need to be together. They need to kind of represent what's similar in the neighborhood. And if you have 3 people or 3 areas, that's great. But to take a completely different concept and put it into some on a lot in the middle of a neighborhood that was built with the intention of single-family housing or whatever, I think the people that have those houses have a right to have somewhat of a similar type of feeling in their neighborhood. And if you drive through Portland and you go into some of the blocks, you'll see nice single-family houses and then 3-story quadplex and with no parking. And it's completely different than what somebody imagined when they bought their house before those were built. So I guess I'm all in favor of setting the, I mean, if there's an 850 square foot limit, I think that maybe that's exclusionary. I think it's more, it fits more of our lifestyle and the precedent that we've set in this town by saying what's a R15 and R750. I mean, we've made all those rules for everyone else. I think we need to have consistency. And then I'm all good for policy 2 for the option 7 or the number 7, option 2. However you want it, you got it. And I think that makes sense. So I would rather keep that going. So.
Thanks, Ken. Now, you understand we can't do anything on the square footage thing tonight. It's not before us.
I understand that, but I do believe that we can give staff direction that we would like that to move
I think what we're hearing from the middle housing bill, 2138, is in the, the middle of session and may make the whole process. So in an effort to not waste time in putting the city team, that's what I would caution us to see what we end up with in that bill, which is rather developed at this point and is really headed to passage. It would just be a waste of kind of a fruitless effort. But I just want to mention that. Okay, Councilor Burdick.
Did George Washington give up when he was on the other side of the Potomac? No, I don't think so.
That's ridiculous. Okay. Councilor Corrigan.
So do you know why developers always choose no tract? Why do they do that?
Well, I don't say they don't always. That's just what we've seen so far here. They haven't moved forward with middle housing land division. There's one cottage cluster that they did get approval for middle housing land division. They haven't recorded it. They haven't moved forward with it. The 2 in first edition did not choose middle housing land division. They were just going to either rent them out or condominiumize them. And I think that might just be an easier process. I think that's why. But I honestly, I don't know. I'd just be speculating. I guess whatever's more marketable to them.
Yeah.
It's just for home ownership or not. It is, middle housing land division requires a public process. It's a minor development application where people can appeal it. It's an extra process.
If you have the thing that's happening down at 223G, so that's the situation where we have this kind of cut up common space with an easement. Will those deeds, do the deeds convey any right to govern that common area? Do you know how that will turn out once this is done? Or will all those deeds be silent? Oh, sorry.
I wish that Evan Boone was back. I mean, it is, when you have an easement, it will outline the terms of the easement. And because it's supposed to be, it is a common courtyard area, there has to be, obviously ability to access, there needs to be provisions in there for maintenance. I don't know what other questions you have. I'm not sure that I can elaborate further than that. I don't know the legal setup for that easement, but it would be very similar to what you would have for a tract. But it is a common area, and it does need to state so in the easement.
Yes, yeah, I think the city manager is more of a legal expert than I am, but she's saying all the correct things, which is, Council Corrigan, President Corrigan, if I heard your question correctly, you were essentially asking if somebody has an easement for this purpose, how does it end up getting legally enforced or recorded? Is that?
Well, or how can we be sure that the people who buy these cottages actually have a voice in the way that the common area is managed?
I see, yeah. I mean, let me put it this way. I do agree that regardless of if it's a tract or an easement, the effect is the same. There could be a couple of ways that I can think of that a recorded easement would be, as you pointed out, probably on a deed. But typically, the way that it would be enforced is actually through probably an agreement that the developer would have. I mean, so there are a number of ways that the people who purchased would understand, either because there's a homeowners association, or because it was required to be recorded on an easement, or because it was a condition of the sale. There are, I think, a number of ways that the prospective buyer would have notice, and then the enforcement capabilities would come similarly from however it was that the seller decided to place those requirements into either a deed, the sales documents. I can think of a number of ways that it would be accomplished.
So that kind of gives the developer more leeway about however they want to manage that, what works for them. It's more in the developer's hands than as a right that the person purchasing the cottage would have on a deed.
No, once you.
I think it's less of a right, although you're correct that, recording something on a deed evidences your legal rights in a different way. But I don't think that in terms of the ability to enforce your right, for example, I assume you're thinking of, someone whose property had either encroached on the common area. Are you trying to think about how could the other members enforce against the encroacher if they didn't have, for example, right, or they didn't mow it, or there are sort of a number of ways that you could get to the ultimate enforcement end. But if your concern is more around that you might end up with kind of an innocent buyer who was unaware of what their rights are, I think it is true to say that an easement is one way that you would absolutely assure that any prospective buyer would be on notice. And my only suggestion is that there are also other ways. And I suppose you are correct that in terms, if we didn't specifically require the recording in an easement, that that would, in fact, I suppose, give developers more flexibility, although it is not my impression that developers actually are they're not asking for, nor do they perceive this, I don't think, as a way to have flexibility.
Okay.
But Jessica, do you have any, or Martha, to add to?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, just if you had any, other insight for our council president about how developers might be viewing the requirement or lack thereof for a tract or an easement for these common areas. Is that better, worse for developers? Do they care?
Well, I mean, considering that the ones that we've seen, I mean, it might be just easier for them to do. I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I think both of them I think creating a separate tract might involve another step in platting. I don't know, but we could certainly find out more information if the council would like us to look into this a bit more. But as far as I know, it is going to be something that is more flexible in terms of, as we talked about, what our guess is it has to do with the setbacks and the requirement to put up a firewall if you're creating a property line rather than an easement.
Well, it's kind of business similar to, access ways on, flag lot developments and such. Those are all held in easement, and neighbors have to just figure out a way to maintain them and obviously not block them. And I mean, we don't have any issues with that I've ever heard of because of the obvious. It's clear what it is. It's an access way. You don't use it as a parking lot, obviously, because you're going to block the access. And someone needs to freaking maintain it, right? And they figure it out. And you know what? By golly, it works because they're just neighbors living together and they figure it out. you know.
I would encourage you to
I'm sorry,
go
Councilman,
home.
it's not your turn to speak. If you can sign back up again. Councilman Boop's turn, he's been
Yeah,
waiting.
I just, for me, it's, I just want to thank the staff that are working very hard because I was in the Planning Commission as a liaison and followed all these things. I just want for the permission of the mayor to let me say that there's something very troubling about the way we are treating people who are elected. Either we threaten them, threaten their lives, like what happened this weekend to the governor of Pennsylvania, or we tell them that they are corrupt because they sleep with developers or with other things. I think that's a very troubling way of treating people who are working very hard for you. A debate can be civilized, contradictory, and challenging because we sit here because we chose to run and to be challenged, to tell people they receive. But when they say that we are corrupt, it's a problem. Like we are showing our children that you should not trust government, and we know the consequences of that. When we don't trust government, it's chaos. We are going to chaos, and probably, maybe we are living chaos. If we consider our police as bad people, that we have to defend them, we are going to the rabbit hole. When you have problem, who are you calling? If we treat the people who work as our clerks, as the people in the city as corrupt, so why do you want to develop something in your house? Why do you want to come see them? We need to change this thing. No one is corrupt here. I know Jessica, I know Evan. Evan has been challenging to me as an elected official in the planting. At my school, I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, I'm repeating that, and yet I am elected. If we were corrupt, we would do it. It's council move, we go. No, it doesn't work like that. This city has people who are wonderful workers, the best in Oregon. That's what it is. From the planning, the engineering, all of them, we have to celebrate them rather than throwing things like that. I disagree with that. It's not a civic or a civilized way of treating people. You have the right, and I'm coming to what you're talking about. Here, these exclusionary practices have been here for hundreds of years. Who cares if you say, oh, I have my house and values? Me too. I have a house. How many people like me live in Lake Oswego? Because of these exclusionary rules that are there in first edition that you are coming here to defend. I can come and say it. We have to realize that no matter what, no one can stop the sea with their arms. You're gonna be drowned. We are moving forward. No one can stop these things. No one is gonna come and tell a developer, oh, you have to do 900 square feet. And if someone build 4,000 square feet, must come in their high horses. Yeah, look at, what's his name again? Randy Sebastian, look what he's doing. But yet, you want the same, like it's a contradictory what we live in here. People have to have the choices. Randy build 4,000, some people buy them, they have the means. You build 500 square feet, that's what I can afford. People like me, that's what they can afford, maybe. And we want to see them in Lake Oswego. Some people like it or not. This is what is going to happen here. We have to tell each other the truth. If we can't do it, we are living in a community of lies and fiction. And I'm not going to serve a community like that. We have to be respectful and move forward. Thank you for your work. It's been a long time coming. You're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Mbu. Councilor Burdick.
For the cottage clusters, per unit, is there, and I'm sorry I don't have the code memorized,
But is there a max size of each unit or a minimum size?
The maximum footprint is 900 square feet.
So that's the footprint, but do we have,
Yeah, it's 1,200? Is that
I
right?
think the maximum size, I think it has to average no more than
Average.
1,000
Okay.
over the,
that's what I thought, though. We
per
have a-
unit, 1,000 square feet, excuse me, per unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just thank you for refreshing my memory. So I kind of lean towards, and I realize there's things that we can't necessarily do tonight, and I respect that. But I like the idea where it makes sense, and it sounds like is a tract only, we're only require, or we can only require it if middle housing. So that's kind of the only option. I still lean towards that just because I think tracts tend to give better definition. So when we can require a tract, that's where I lean personally, is going that direction versus an easement. Again, I think that clarity is important. And yes, to a point, you could say, well, in a flag lot, you have easements and so forth, but often when you have a flag lot, you've got a drive, which is kind of the easement, and that's very clearly defined, whereas you start getting open spaces and it's not as clearly defined. So again, where we have that ability to require a tract, I definitely lean towards a tract. I'm curious about the home side, the footprint of the 800 square foot minimum. And my reason is because often we talk about the cottage clusters in terms of this is a place where maybe seniors can downsize or, and if you want that, you actually want main level living. So you're not looking to have 2-story living. And 850 square feet is not a huge space, but it would be enough to have that main floor living. So I think that might encourage more main level living where our seniors and so forth can downsize into. So in some hands, yes, we could look at it as, oh, this is exclusionary, but actually maybe it's not because we're creating housing that's needed in our community. And again, that's for people with disabilities, that's for aging. So that 850 square foot minimum may serve our community really well in terms of giving a need that we don't often get. So I'm very curious about that. I also understand that we may need to wait and just see where the state lands and then pick up that discussion once we have that clarity, because I don't want to waste staff's time. But again, I think that's an interesting area that we do need to talk about, because again, if we're sitting here saying, oh, we can do basically, maybe 600 square feet with another 400 up. Again, I just don't know that we're meeting the need that often we think about from these cottage clusters. So that's where I stand on those, and then I'm all for option 2. So,
Are the applications that we've received, are those lots less than 850 square, or those footprints less than 850 square feet?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say without looking into them. I think they're close to 900 each. They think they've maxed out where they can. But footprint, yeah, the footprint
I don't know what the
size.
problem is.
But I'd have to look at each one of them. They're all 2-story.
They're all two.
The one has a basement, and yeah, I'd have to look at, each one is different.
That's right.
Yeah, they're all different.
They're all different, yeah. Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. I'm going to say what my colleagues, Councilor Wetland and Councilor Verdict said, except in my words. A task at hand, definitely option 2. I think that makes sense, and I agree with everything that was said. On the minimum square foot of these cottages, I definitely think we need to have a minimum requirement. And what goes through my mind is, from experience, what has occurred down in Bay Area, where you can actually buy a condo that's 350 square feet. So what we don't want to happen in our city is that we have these cottages that are pretty much hotel room sizes and bunch of them. Somebody will figure out how to build more of them and sell them or occupy more of them. So we want to keep our neighborhood like a neighborhood and not all of a sudden turn them into these small units that people are going to have a tough time living in there, and that's quality of life also. But I suggest that we put this on the docket and wait to see what happens with the proposed housing bill. If it passes, then our hands are tied. If it doesn't pass, then we want to have the staff look at it. On the commons area, I had very, very detailed conversation with Evan, and and the city attorney is also correct. The end result is the same, but how people get there or they don't get there is, I think, what we're talking about. Do we want to be in the business of helping neighborhoods not to have conflicts? Because I know, again, city manager knows this. We have neighborhoods in city of Lake Oswego where the city does not own those cities, those roads, and the neighborhood has to take care of those roads. When they buy their properties, they don't read cover to understand what is it they're buying and what is it they're not buying. So a commons area that belongs to some property owners and not others, it will create an issue. And the question becomes, do we want to end up resolving those issues, or do we want to completely say, this is what your developer did, you guys have to deal with it? So like Councillor Verdict said, we want to do something that creates a better neighbors and not create a situation where we would have neighbors having conflicts and they have to resolve it. So I'm leaning toward that strategy. But again, for tonight, I think we can't make that decision, but we could say these two topics, we want to wait till we find out the proposed housing bill. Either we have one topic to discuss or two topics to discuss in the future. And I do want to thank those who came and testified tonight. I can see you're very passionate about this, and you are reminding us of our commitment to you and everybody else. And we certainly want to honor those commitments. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. Is there a minimum size requirement for cottage?
Yeah, minimum footprint, 900 square feet.
Not a minimum.
No, that's the max.
Sorry, maximum, sorry. There's not a minimum, sorry.
There's no minimum.
Yeah,
There's no square footage minimum to be anything.
It's maximum.
Okay,
Yeah, 900.
okay, well, yeah, that's the issue there. Councilor Winland, sorry, please.
Well, I just want to go back to the common area. So my understanding is the way that it is written, either way that you work with the developer, you'll have the same outcome where they'll have to have somewhat of a prescribed living situation. Is that right?
That's right.
So I would just suggest everyone living in a neighborhood with an HOA, and you'll find out that not everyone is kumbaya and your dream. We just had one this last week, and it was just interesting to hear comments of neighbors that have lived next door to each other for 20 years, and all of a sudden an argument goes over a tree or a bush. It's just amazing what changes people's minds. So whatever we can do to set it up for success, to make sure that, and here's one side that we haven't really talked about, is that developers are very valuable to this city, and we do, the builders and so on, we appreciate them to know, we are so happy that they're investing in Lake Oswego. But I also know many of them, and they will take every advantage to the code that they will possibly live with. So we just have to make sure that we put the right parameters on so that we get the desired outcomes. And I think it's been clear on the desired outcomes that we want to try to maintain our Lake Oswego community and support both the developer and our neighborhoods so that they're both successful and they're working well with each other. And I think we can do that. We've done a good job of that over the years. And I think neighborhood voices matter. We've noticed that with overlays and all kinds of different things that we've put into our code. And I think it's respectful to say that having the input today helped us focus on some of the possible outcomes that could happen if we don't do policy right. So while sometimes it's hard to understand everything and put everything into the right piece of paper, and Evan, I appreciate all the other code stuff that you went through. How you guys keep this straight, I'll never know. But I thank you, and I know that each individual action that somebody wants to take puts a pressure on our code of some way. And we maybe didn't think of every possible outcome. And so that's why we have these code revisions each and every year, and I appreciate them, and I know your staff is working hard at them. So I just don't want to lose the momentum maybe that we have on this, and I know we're not going to vote on this tonight, but I support my colleagues to say that we need to look at it. I'd still like to charge forward regardless of what Salem is doing and maybe send them a message, but that's just my personal take on it. So
Thank you, Councilor Winley. Councilor Verdict.
Very, very quickly, I just wanted to thank you for cleaning up the code in terms of historic landmarks. So thank you for that. Very, very appreciated. And I also just wanted to comment, if it was easy as picking up the phone to talk with Salem, trust me. Well, we did pick up the phone on a number of occasions, but I guess my point is it's not that easy to pick up the phone and get that resolved. And so we use every method. I know we've all been on contact with our representatives and people we know down in Salem, in addition to staff, just working endlessly to try to work for our goals as a city. So we definitely are doing that. I wish it was that easy, but it's unfortunately not. But again, thank you, Evan and Jessica and your staffs for everything. This is a huge undertaking. Really appreciate you.
Well, I hear everyone, thank you, Councilor Burdick. I hear consensus around option number 2 for number 7. So do you need that in the motion, or can we?
It should be part of the motion.
We're going to
yes.
make that part of the motion. Okay, well then, and then I hear my colleagues too, that we're going to see how things flush out with 2138 and we're going to see how things flush out with 2138, and then we'll be back in the fall, yeah. So I'll move that we tentatively approve ordinance 2959, including option number 2 for policy item number 7, and direct staff to return on May 6, 2025 with the final version of the ordinance, including findings and conclusions for LU 24-0029.
Second.
All right, motion been made by me, seconded by Councilor Mboop. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Afghan? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Franstad. Thanks, Ms. Numanu. Thank you. We're going to take a recess.
Yeah, I want to go just.
Okay, we are back in order, and we have a couple study sessions tonight. The first is our annual police department report and update. We'll welcome Chief Burke and Captain Simon.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm George Burke. I'm the Chief of Police. Clayton Simon is Captain with the Police Department. We are going to brief in this. As we've done over the years, we have given you, did I say that right, briefing? We're going to make this more brief. We've given this presentation to you for the last 3 years. This is at least the third time that I've done it. And I am going to say that I'm super proud of the fact that we don't have a big crowd here tonight. And I think that says a lot about the work that we've done in our community and focusing on community trust and the things we've done to build that in our communities. And what I'm super proud of is the work of the people who came before me. For the last 5 years, we've gotten to the place where we are today, and we wouldn't be here without all of the things, the listening sessions, what we did to engage community to get to where we are. I'm going to hit a really couple of quick areas of things that we've focused on during the last year and we're moving forward with next year. One of the things that we just instituted and we put some information out on is our online reporting for police. And there is some code and aspect to it as well, but it has not really been overly highly publicized. What we want to make sure that our community understands or at least appreciates is the fact that if you call for a police officer, you're going to get a police officer to show up. Online reporting is meant to create a convenience for our community if they want to make a report, if they don't feel like they want to wait around for somebody to contact them, or it's just easier for them to go down that path. So online reporting went live a couple weeks ago. We're seeing a success in it. People are utilizing it, and we're going to continue to work forward and putting the information out as to how people can access that to make life easier for them. We also instituted our drone program. I think we put that out. I'd say it took a lot to get that off the ground, but sorry, I took it. So thank you. Super proud of the work that was done in order to get the drone program moving forward. We've been able to utilize it. I think we even used it this last weekend on a search and rescue effort out on the river. So that's really exciting for us. We've entered into an agreement, as you well know, with the transit or with TriMet to focus on providing resources to the transit police. We're still trying to figure out how and when we can actually provide those resources, given some other staffing issues. Moving into page 2, one last thing, behavioral health unit. Thanks to a grant that we received, we're able to fill that spot. We're in the process right now where we've given a conditional job offer, and we're now moving forward in that process and really excited about how that program is going to continue to grow. So just adapting to where we are in today's environment. Moving forward really quickly, we've made some changes in the organization. We now have broken that into 4 divisions. That's 3 lieutenants that focus on a lot of the work, and then our communications manager that works in LOCOM. I want to take the time to at least recognize this is Telecommunicators Week, and the work that our folks do in LOCOM is unlike any other place I've ever seen. And the environment in that office, the environment with the people who are there, the leadership that's been put in place with our communications is spectacular. And I could not be happier or more proud of the work that they do and how efficient and effective they are in the work that they do. Really briefly on staffing, we're currently in a place where we have a couple vacancies. We have people in the pipeline to get hired, as you well know. It takes us about a year from the time that we hire them to actually get them to count into staffing, because it takes that long to get them trained and get them out on their own. So we are committed to continue to move forward. We have anticipated vacancies that are coming up through retirements and other folks looking for other opportunities in other organizations. So clearly retention continues to be a problem. We continue to focus on ways to encourage people to stay with the city of Lake Oswego, and we look at other opportunities for our officers to go out and get experiences that might be more than what they would expect that they would get. We'll be promoting one person with the retirement of a sergeant, so we'll be promoting a sergeant here in the near future. And we're also, as a result of some of the retention issues, it's kind of forced us to go out and do an external recruitment for a couple detectives, which is unlike it's just not common for us to do. So given some of the environment that we're working in, trying to get people who have a little bit more experience into our organization and create some other opportunities. We have 5 really good candidates right now that are set for interview next week, so pretty excited about where that's heading. That is a brief lowdown on where we are with the organization and kind of the state of where we are. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Simon. He's presented this data to you for a couple years now, so you should pretty much be used to the format.
All right, well, thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everyone. So I will go pretty quick, and we have lots of pictures as opposed to diagrams, so I'm going to dive right into this. Overall, from 23 to 24, total incidents decreased by about 5%. Incidents are broken up into 2 categories, as you might recall: calls for service and self-initiated activity. Our calls for service remained about the same, maybe a 0.25% difference between 2023 and 2024, so essentially the same service load. Differences in our self-initiated activity, where we saw a 21% decrease from the year prior. There's a couple reasons for that we've been able to look at. One is, as the Chief talked about, our patrol staffing, with some folks moving into other assignments or with some retirements. We had to really rely on our motor support team, our traffic officers, to backfill into the patrol spots. And those guys are the ones that really are responsible for most of the self-initiated activity in the form of traffic stops. So they're focusing on regular patrol duty, so those have dipped just a little bit. From 23 to 24, breaking it down even further on our calls for service, what's great news is you can see Part 1 crimes are down about 12%. Part 2 crimes are down 29%. Miscellaneous offenses down 2%, and arrests are down 2%. Councilor Winland, I'm going this fast just for you right now because you said so. So noteworthy calls for service. It's good to recognize and remember that, oh, see, it's almost time to restart your device. Let's not do that. I just want to turn you off. Stop it. 5 minutes, yes. All right, here we go. Remember that some of these calls, right, they're very, very infrequent, so any change in the numbers is going to seem very drastic. So when I read off the percentages, just keep in mind, it might be going from 3 to 4, 4 to 3. So crashes and hit and runs are down 8% over the year. Assaults are down 18%. Burglaries are up 6%. Robberies are down 25%. Again, small number there. Stolen vehicle and parts are down 11%, and they continue to trend down. If you'll remember, going all the way back to 2020, that was a big deal, right? That was a lot that we were dealing with there. Recovered stolen vehicles are up 6%. Still small numbers there. Thefts are down 18%, and weapon offenses are up 25%. Again, small numbers, that's why you're seeing that significant increase. My favorite category as a former traffic officer, get into our traffic violations. So as we've discussed before, our focus on traffic stops is addressing behaviors that we know lead to crashes, especially in those areas that we know that lead to crashes or where they occur. Top 3 citations you'll see consistent year over year, which is exactly what we want to see, are speed, cell phone use, and traffic control devices in that order. These citations, they account for the bulk of the citations that we issue and the infractions that we address on our traffic stops. And as was mentioned earlier, use of the traffic division in order to backfill patrol, reduce those opportunities for self-initiated enforcement. Or if you want to be very positive, everyone's driving really, really well. So that's the other view you could take a look at. I know I see some head shaking. Maybe it's a bit of both. Speed is down in terms of citations, 43%. Again, that's where our motor team gets out there and hammers is more than just about anything. Cell use down 26%, traffic control device down 16%. Overall violations cited decreased by about 19% from 23 to 24. Now, if you remember the Oregon Stop Report, this is mandated by the legislature that all self-initiated contacts by law enforcement, again, not tied to calls for service, but we decide to make a contact, have to be reported to the state. The vast majority of these are through traffic stops. We have very few that are actually subject stop related that aren't tied to calls. Everything is reported to the state. We go through our computer-aided dispatch system or CAD system in order to do that. And like 2024, we had no statistically significant disparities in the state's tests. Those tests are obviously looking for signs of bias in the types of stops and the dispositions to those stops. A little bit more data that you can pull right out of the stop report. Again, vast majority are self-initiated contacts. Bottom line is everyone's making good stops for good reasons. And you kind of look back a couple slides ago, you can see that the vast majority of our traffic stops, again, speed, cell phone, people not stopping at stop signs or red lights, those types of things. Anyone can visit the CJC site and really deep dive into this data if you're really interested. And if there are any questions on the tests used, please let me know. We did talk about them previously, but if not, I will move on. Use of force, this is an important one for us. So you may recall our definition of what we consider force or use of the force is at a pretty low threshold. We definitely err on the side of documentation for every action. Myself and other command staff examine force reports throughout the year, not just annually. So we're looking at them as they're kind of coming in on a monthly basis to really help us identify any trends or any issues or ways in which we can better provide service and how we're responding to things. As in years past, the vast majority of our force interactions are the result of calls for service that we've been dispatched to as opposed to self-initiated activity. Now, use of force incidents broken down, the most important thing to remember is how rare the use of force actually is compared to the number of incidents that we actually go to on a year. So we had just about 26,000 incidents last year, and 64 of those incidents resulted in some sort of use or display of force. That's less than 0.25% of everything that we do results in even a display or use of force. So there was, in total, there was a 30% increase in force incidents, which is still pretty similar to other years when you look at the data there. The number of injuries to officers or subjects was about the same, and they really consisted of minor scrapes, bruises, or sprains, nothing significant. There were no serious injuries or no serious injuries or claims reported against the city related to any use of force last year. Examining the data further, you can see that total uses of force in those 64 incidents is up 32%. It appears tied to more officers showing up on calls. So when you start looking at some of the data up there, we're bringing a lot of resources to the incidents that we go to, which means you have the opportunity for more people to display force, which is typically where we see some of that, where we see that big increase. And also, several of the calls that we responded to, we had more than one subject involved, right? So if I display, my firearm on a particular call and there's 2 people there, that is 2 uses of force. So lastly, we have 2 canine units. As you can see up there, we saw a 50% decrease in the use of the canines. There's a couple of reasons for that. Part of that was we were down to 1 canine at one point during the year, and while we were working to train up the other handler, we ultimately ended up having to retire Semi. And so I think a few of you showed up for that, really appreciated it. Kind of brought tears to eye. Officer Ball did a really great job in talking about the commitment of Semi there. This year we'll be looking to acquire 2 dogs as Canine Chase is also getting pretty close there to retirement. So we're looking for 2 new dogs and 2 new handlers probably.
Not 2 dogs. Handler.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, Shayla, don't get nervous.
Yeah, it's okay. Listen to him. Breaking down the force types, you can see that we had 184 different types of force. Again, within those 64 incidents, this is all the force and how it was broken out. The majority, as you can see, is physical control, followed by the display of a handgun. And in 2023, we started examining the difference between a display of force and the actual force that was used or pointed at someone. And I believe the chief can offer a little bit more explanation on that.
Again, this is, I'll just get right to the point. We tend to over-report our use of force because we separate out the display as well as the actual application. And so one of the things that we're doing as we move forward is kind of changing how we categorize the display to our opportunities for de-escalation. And what that really focuses on is when a weapon is displayed and is not necessary or not used, we really need to take a look at that as a success, and we want to make sure that we're capturing those events as they occur.
So when we do that, you can see there's a 41% decrease in the actual force that's used, right? And so then the biggest, contributor that you see up there is really physical control, which is exactly what you would expect. So everything else dramatically drops. The other data we started capturing last year was centered around the circumstances of the incidents requiring the use or display of force, and they can involve many different factors. So there isn't it's not a 1-for-1 up there. You could have someone that was intoxicated, driving a stolen vehicle that had a warrant for the arrest after they just assaulted their significant other, right? And all those could contribute into one particular incident. But we ask our officers to kind of capture what those circumstances are to help explain why we're running into the things that we're running into. Elude and resist is obviously the most prevalent, followed by subjects involved with the property crimes, behavioral health situations, or other person crimes. And out of the 79 people that were involved in those 64-ish incidents, 79% of the persons involved were white. So we broke it down again by those different factors specific to those demographics, so you can take a look at what those are there. And remember, you can have more than one incident factor present on any incident. Now we'll talk about complaints, and you'll recall that there are two types. There are formal complaints, which if it's conduct that if true would equate to a, did I not go? Oh, sorry, I didn't hit it hard enough, apologize. So formal complaints, conduct that if true would equate to a policy, law, or rule violation, and informal complaints that conduct that if true would not be a violation of policy, law, or rule. So the difference being someone gets a speeding ticket, they didn't like that they got a speeding ticket, they call in to say the officer shouldn't have given me a speeding ticket. That's an informal complaint. All complaints can be either internally generated or externally. So sometimes they come from within, sometimes they come from outside the walls. We'll take them whether they're named or they're anonymous, and we look at them all and treat them all very seriously. And so like force, it's pretty rare, right? When you consider how many interactions we have with folks throughout the year, and I think that's a testament to the good job that our folks are out there doing. But from 23 to 24, we saw a 25% decrease in the total number of complaints. Again, small numbers. There was one more internal complaint as compared to the year prior, and only 2 external complaints in 2024 compared to 5 in 23. There were no use of force complaints, as we mentioned before. There were 2 bias-based policing complaints. Each were not substantiated, and by state law, we did send the recap of what those investigations were to the state as required. They actually show up in the CJC stop report now, so you'll actually see those there. Going to our behavioral health specialist, we've now had 2 full years of working with our behavioral health specialist, Amber Hambrick. She's doing a great job. You can see she's really busy, and as the chief talked about, we're in the process of adding that grant-funded VHU case manager this year to assist, and we're getting pretty close to finalizing all that. From 23 to 24, Lake Oswego saw increases in activity across the board with Amber. There was a 53% increase in her responses with officers to calls. There was a 25% increase in responses without officers. There was a 33% increase in responses with our adult resource officer, and there was a 36% increase in phone outreach that she had. She works 1 day with West Lynn, and they help pay for that. And in the work that she's doing in West Lynn, there was a 13% decrease in the number of responses she had with officers, and a 60% decrease in responses without officers. And then her phone outreach was actually the same, so it ended up staying exactly the same. So she stays really busy. And that's not even counting all the different trainings and everything else that she puts on for us, some of our other departments here in the city, and just talking with people. So moving into overdoses in Lake Oswego, I'm going to turn it over to the chief.
My turn. It's down. So we see a decrease, overall decrease of 53% in overdoses. We see a 75% decrease in fatal overdoses, 50% decrease in non-fatal overdoses. One of the things, obviously, programs that are being put in place with naloxone, I think, have added to the reduction of overdose deaths. So I think that's pretty significant as we look at.
That's part of it.
I don't know what conclusions to come to based on what the numbers show. I know that the naloxone programs are certainly have an impact on reduced deaths. I also am concerned that we're getting reduced reportings based on the fact that naloxone is in the homes and we may not be getting calls to service for those. So I'm not, what do you call that? I'm not taking a victory lap yet. So that's really all I'm going to say about overdoses. Go right to the end. So, as promised, we shortened it up. We didn't get into a whole lot of detail. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. We can get into the details as you desire. So.
No, well, thank you very much for coming, for the good report, great slides. I really appreciate it. Like we say to you guys all the time, the community puts so much trust in the work you do and the culture that you've all cultivated as the 2 leaders of the department, of course, along with Martha, is phenomenal. And we see the difference in the folks when we interact with them. I know the community sees it as well. It's a tangible difference. We don't see the issues here in LO that we do see in other, that you see elsewhere, you know, and it's thanks to you all for sticking with, for really propagating that culture within the ranks. And we see it out here in these results. And of course, we're thankful that we have a safe community as well, and all of that. But you all do a lot of complicated work behind the scenes. We know, and so thank you, and thank you for being here. I have a question. I was, you know, how do you, so like the stops, so we're like the traffic stops. Is there a way that we measure the kind of productivity of an officer? Like you have an officer on patrol. Like, is that, you know, like if you're overnight, how do you know they're just not like sleeping in the Applebee's parking lot?
That's really interesting that you asked that question today. So what I would say is that there are a whole lot of different ways that we're able to measure the productivity of the officers. We recognize the fact that our supervisors have at least a 1-to-3 ratio, and so sitting and meeting with our folks and observing all what they do every day is fairly autonomous. So we take a look at the data. We take a look at how many calls for service have they responded to, how much self-initiated activity have they done, how many traffic stops have they done, how many citations have they written, how many reports have they written. How long are they sitting in one particular location based on what the data available to us tells us at any particular time. So there are a whole lot of different ways, but there are also the intangibles in what they do. And when they make community contacts where they're building trust in our communities, and they may not necessarily be showing as doing something, they are doing something. And even one of the things we focus on is rather than just driving through neighborhoods, we want to drive in neighborhoods. So it's really important that we take those opportunities to engage, even in non-traditional law enforcement perspective, right? So how do we make those contacts that are not enforcement related?
Right. Okay. So it's something that you all pay attention to.
Yes, sir.
And monitor. I will say, just like anecdotally, I have noticed a lot more of just on the weekends when I know it's not traffic, obviously. Of them, you know, being proactive and sitting out looking for, you know, doing traffic work, which has been great to see because I hadn't, not that I'm everywhere, but I noticed it. So.
Well, there's been a focus on making sure that the cars aren't in the basement and they're out in the community.
Yes, it's good. That's good. Okay, Councilor Boob.
Thank you. I'm always, you know, very attentive to the community policing because, you know, when it started, it was us. And I'm very proud, like on the 15th of March, I met a guy who I was talking to, and he said, I really want to work in Lake Oswego Police. He didn't know what that he was talking, and I just tell him, whoa, why? He said, it's the best police. And I think he will apply. I don't want to say his name or something. Yeah, I won't. I don't even know his name, honestly. But I met him, and when he spoke highly of our police, it was very, like, uplifting to me. And I didn't want to reveal my identity, but the house we went say, oh, he's a counselor. And I say, why are you saying that? So it was very good to hear that. And the other thing, some months ago, I was in my house and, you know, all of a sudden I heard, you know, something and my alarm went off like it was 3 in the morning and something. I just say, wow, I have to go down there. You know, that's when you respect the police because it's my house, but I hesitated even to go down. But like by the time I start to talk to the things, I saw 2 officers having their lights, like coming into the house and they were leaving. I come down, open and call them. They came back. We check all the house. He said, and even I said, oh, maybe, he said, no, I already went there. He went to the back of the house, checked. He said, there is no footprint. We looked, it was a sensor that triggered the things. And I went to bed thinking that, honestly, we are very lucky because like it came like right away. they arrive. And that shows also that you folks are doing a wonderful job. And you deserve some time, you know. When things work, it has to be said. We just not, when you started, you say, oh, there's not many people because, you know, but why it's always in the critics? A critic should be positive, like you are doing wonderful things, it has to be recognized. Not wait till one person made a mistake and we all shoot on. So for that reason, I'm very happy and proud of what you're doing. And I just saw the, you know, the complaints, like internal complaint. I don't want to talk about it here. I will ask her here. But honestly, you have to pat your folks. And that's why every time there's a retirement, I come to just to show that we, as a council, we are very proud of your work. No one write to us to say, they can call me for something, but not, oh, officer, this and that. Every time they write to us is to say something good you did. You saved someone or you intervened. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mahmood. Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Chief, I wanted to share some historical tribal knowledge with you. Lake Oswego, I have a lot of contacts with a lot of public, especially outside of Lake Oswego. And most still have the Lake Oswego reputation of back in 90s, early 90s and late 80s. And when I challenge them and ask them questions about what are they seeing in the last couple decades, then they struggle to answer. But the last couple decades, the city councils, the city managers, and the police chiefs have taken initiative to hire the right personality, train people with the right mindset, and help the officers to understand that we serve first and protect next. And all of this has created a care and concern from the officers that it's setting the right culture with the right training and right attitude when they approach the public in city of Lake Oswego. So for that, I'm grateful and I'm proud to be one of the Lake Oswego residents. And I can tell from personal experience, not because I violated the law, but because of, at the time, Officer Simon approached me because he had care and concern for my well-being. So all of this to say, thank you for your service, Lake Oswego Police Department.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Afghan. All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the great report. Great to have you here.
Thanks for letting us.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And next item on the agenda is our study session on the 20 speed signing overview and implementation.
Want me to sit
We
back
have
here or up here?
Mr. Farley.
I appreciate that. I didn't do anything.
All right.
You broke it.
Got that restarted, freshly updated computer.
All right, that'll work.
Got these calls.
Magic.
Good afternoon, mayors and councilors. I'm Will Farley. I'm the Assistant City Engineer and Staff Liaison to the Transportation Advisory Board. We'll be going over our 20 is plenty kind of program that I presented to the board not too long ago. Here's the agenda. I'm going to start slower with all the legal stuff and hopefully get a little more interesting as we proceed. I'm going to take the police department as an example and go fast because I know it's getting late in the day. So, since these are legal definitions, part of the wordiness of the slides, Speed limits are set one of two ways in the state of Oregon, either by statute through the Oregon Revised Statutes or by speed zone order. Statutory speed limits are default limits on the specific definitions of roadways. If roads are not defined by one of these categories, generally they're assigned a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit as the basic rule. For roadways that need a different speed limit, they are assigned through a speed zone order. These speed zone orders are set through an engineering study reviewed and approved by the state Oregon Department of Transportation that looks at data such as lane and shoulder widths, number of intersections and accesses, roadside development and context, presence of on-street parking and bike lanes, pedestrian and bicycle activity, crash history, and general speeds of the traffic, including the average speeds and the 85th percentile, or what we know as prevailing speed of traffic. So, since speed limits are set by regulation and come with legal penalties, things get to be specifically designed by the Oregon Revised Statutes. Narrow residential roadways are two-way roadways that are located in a residence district that are no more than 18 feet wide at any point between intersections or between the intersection and the roadway. Residence districts are territories contiguous to the roadway that have access to property primarily occupied by multifamily dwellings or that has an average of 150 feet or less between access serving dwellings. And then not listed but often asked are business districts. Their territories contiguous to a highway where 50% or more of the frontage thereon for a distance of 600 feet or more on one side or 300 feet or more on both sides is occupied by buildings used for businesses. Think B Avenue over there between State and 5th. So moving on, thanks to Portland and other jurisdictions that wanted to follow their suit, Senate Bill 558 in 2019 allowed all cities to reduce statutory speed limits on non-arterial residential roadways by 5 miles per hour through Oregon Revised Statute 810-180-11. This was later updated in 2023 by House Bill 2095 to be 10 miles an hour so long as the speed limit is not reduced below 20 miles an hour. Since 2020, counties have also been able to start reducing their speed limits in residence districts in a similar manner per ORS 810-180-10, but they have to meet more stringent criteria such as a maximum volume of traffic, an 85th percentile speed of less than 30 miles an hour, and the presence of a traffic control device that indicates bicycles and pedestrians may be present. Now going into the bit of the background, 20 is Plenty. This program is generally tied to a jurisdiction's Vision Zero plan or the application of what's called the Safe Systems approach. Vision Zero is a strategy that started in Sweden in the 1990s that works to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries in the community. The Safe Systems approach, which has been adopted by Clackamas County and is starting to get a little bit more widespread adoption, takes Vision Zero a bit further and identifies 6 principles that help get to zero deaths. They are deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable, humans make mistakes, humans are vulnerable, responsibility is shared between all users, safety is proactive, and redundancy is crucial. So how does 20 is Plenty fit in? Studies show that a collision between a vehicle and a vulnerable user at 20 miles per hour has a 10% chance to result in a serious injury or fatality. As that speed increases, the likelihood of that serious injury or fatality increases exponentially. So, in Oregon, so far only a few jurisdictions have taken advantage of the ability to reduce speed limits since Portland started this in 2018. Eugene followed shortly after Senate Bill 558 was passed. Then Tigard started in 2021 with a corridor-focused sort of approach, but has since evolved it to be all or most of their local residential roadways. Clackamas County is expected to begin implementing a shared streets program that reduces their speed limits to 20 through their upcoming Walk by Clackamas plan after its expected adoption next month. Washington, our neighbor to the north, has had a few more jurisdictions also implemented 20 is Plenty since Seattle started theirs in 2016, but still not quite that many. So since the adoption of the program has been rather limited, so too has the evaluation of its impacts in a nearby context. One of the most often cited studies came from Portland State University's review of the effects of 20 is Plenty program in 2020. That's a lot of 20s. The study showed that when looking at 58 sites in total, the average speeds and 85th percentile speeds remain unchanged when measured overall. However, then when looking at a site-by-site basis, the mean speed did decrease at 57% of the sites studied by an average of about 1.4 mile an hour. The 85th percentile speed was found to have decreased at 86% of the sites, and the number of vehicles exceeding 30 miles per hour was reduced at 69% of the sites, with the average reduction of about 3.8% reduction at those, and the highest being about 29.5% reduction at one of the sites. I should note that this study did not incorporate crash data because of the limited time frame it got to review before and after data. It was 5 years of before data versus 6 months of after data. So when looking at other areas and their effects, Seattle found their program to reduce crashes by 7.4%, but the result wasn't considered to be significant. When studying a corridor prior to implementing the 20 is Plenty program in Bellevue, they saw a 24% reduction in those traveling over 30 miles an hour. So kind of moving on to how an implementation plan would work for the city of Lake Oswego. The map on this slide shows all the streets in the city that could be eligible for reducing the statutory speed limit. To give a reference, we have about 190 miles of roads in the city. About 70% are local roadways, and about 10% are neighborhood collectors. And then the remaining 20% would be our arterials and major collectors. So going into data, since 20 is Plenty is generally aimed at a Vision Zero program or a safe systems approach that reduce serious or fatal crashes, I wanted to kind of bring in the crash data. ODOT, I need to note that ODOT has about a 2-year delay on publishing their crash data. So I went between 2019 and 2023 for these. I also need to note that we had a period early in the COVID pandemic where speeding was generally faster or higher due to significantly lower traffic volumes. And as a result, severity of crashes was also higher in during the pandemic. So kind of the one crash I want to call note that we need to reference, 2019, the one fatal crash occurred April of 2019. It was on Fernwood, which is a neighborhood collector, near Glen Haven. A northbound driver struck a pedestrian walking in the travel lane, and the crash was attributed to careless driving. So we're going to go down a little bit down the rabbit hole. This slide shows the crashes that occurred on local roadways where the 20 is Plenty program would be implemented. 13% of the total crashes on these roadways were on these roadways with no fatalities and only 2 resulting in serious injuries over the 5 years. Since I'll be talking a little bit more about neighborhood collectors or posing a question on them, I wanted to also show the data on those busier streets. As mentioned earlier, we did have a fatal collision on Fernwood that involved a pedestrian, and then we've had 4 other serious crashes on neighborhood collectors, one of which involved a pedestrian in 2020. So kind of going into more data. Yeah, the only ones that involved a pedestrian injury were highlighted. So every year the city collects traffic volumes and travel speeds on about roughly 90 to 100 different areas in the city. It's through our annual counts program. While we are mostly monitoring traffic volumes on major collectors and arterials, we also do check in on our neighborhood collectors on local streets that have had a safety concern raised by a resident. I provided 2 tables up here showing the speeds collected during last spring's efforts throughout the city. The 85th percentile speed on local roadways generally does fall within that 20 to 30 mile per hour range, while neighborhood collectors generally have a bit higher speed ranging between 28 miles an hour and 37 miles an hour, thanks to Goodall. Then, with some help from our colleagues at the police department, I was able to see what citations were given for speeding and careless driving on local roadways and neighborhood collector streets over the last 5 years. While most citations are given on streets that carry the most traffic, a small amount are given on neighborhood collectors and an even smaller amount on local roadways. Again, I need to note that some of this data does include some activity during the COVID pandemic when the level of enforcement was reduced. So now that you have all of my background information, we'll move on to how I propose the implementation to the Transportation Advisory Board. I provided the board with these initial recommendations that we're attempting to make an implementation of a program intuitive and easy to enforce, just to set them up for a discussion. First, I felt that drivers should be encouraged to use neighborhood collectors, which are generally designed to have a faster speed. In fact, our engineering design manual calls out a design speed of 30 miles per hour on a neighborhood collector. Next, I felt signs for the lower speed limit should be posted in residential areas when first entering the district from a collector or arterial, when that speed limit is most likely to be changing to that lower amount. Then, all existing 25 mile per hour signs within the district should either be replaced or, if overly redundant, removed. Additionally, roadways only falling within the city's jurisdiction should be signed to avoid confusion or contradictions. We have many roads that change from Clackamas County or bounce between them. We also would need to avoid posting speed limit signs on narrow residential roadways, which actually have a speed limit of 15. And lastly, but mostly as a note, we would exclude private roadways as they are sometimes not designed to our city standards. So big map, small symbols. With those recommendations in mind, I provided the Transportation Advisory Board a map showing where most of our 25 mile per hour signs are currently posted within the city, and I identified locations that either needed new signs posted or ones that needed to be replaced. From this analysis and the assumed costs listed on this slide, it is expected that the project would have a rough cost of about $115,000 for the engineering side of the project. This does not include costs for staff to provide education outreach or for the program or any enforcement efforts from our police department. When I took initial recommendations from the Transportation Advisory Board for discussion, it was requested that we possibly look at posting neighborhood collectors at 20 miles an hour as well, as they are the streets that have often been perceived of having the most speeding. Thinking of like Goodall and Westview. Staff was also requested to keep looking into additional data on the effects of the program to see if there would be a reduction in serious injury crashes, an effect on driver behavior, or a benefit to the community. In the end, the board was rather undecided if the program would be worth the cost, since it would be difficult to identify any way of measuring the success. So, since the question did come up looking at neighborhood collectors and signing them at 20 miles an hour, we did do additional work, and that since then, to look at what signs would need to be replaced for that one. It increased the project about $26,500 to $143,500 to include those streets. So before I hand this over to City Council for discussion, kind of touching on the next steps, the program would require a City Council ordinance adopting the lower speed limits to go to 20 miles an hour on residential roadways. If we are directed to move forward, we'll need to come up with an education program. I want to say the reason Portland's was so successful was the amount of outreach in the yard signs that they put out on almost every block. Engineering would need to begin working with Public Works on kind of the installation of the signs and where they're needed, and would need to include like utility locates for any new posts going into the ground. And we would also need to work with our colleagues at the police department to help with education and later on the law enforcement where it's needed. And with that, I turn it over for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Farley. I think that data, like the 85th percentile data, is useful, because it kind of gives a general pattern. But as a, pedestrian, it only takes the one car to smash you. Mm-hmm. So, from a user experience, I might be out and 99% of cars are great. Move over, slow down, but it's the one car that doesn't and that brushes you with their side mirror that you're like, well, that wasn't great and I almost died. And that's what you remember. And so I think the data is good, but we got to put it also in like that user perspective, because you don't need to get hit by 85% of the cars. You only need to get hit by one bad driver, who's being careless or going too fast, and then you're dead or seriously injured, or even just scared, Okay, anyway, yes. Counselor Verdict and then Counselor Afghan on those.
I just have a quick question. What is the definition of serious injury versus an injury?
Okay, serious injury is one that an ambulance is called. It is broken bones and incapacitating. An injury is generally a minor injury, sometimes that they have an ambulance called, but it's not an incapacitating. They're not unconscious. It's not expected to have a long-time health effect on them.
Thank you.
Counselor Afghan and then Counselor Corrigan.
Question regarding what is the neighborhood arteries speed limit like Goodall right now?
Goodall speed limit is a neighborhood collector. Its speed limit's 25.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Afghan. Counselor Corrigan.
There we go. My question is, as you categorize neighborhood collectors, do you measure how wide those streets are?
So the functional classification of those roadways came in quite a long time ago. We do have some that are 11 feet wide travel lanes to 20 and 22-foot total width. Generally, our design for a neighborhood collector is 12-foot travel lanes. Occasionally, a bike lane, I think, can be included in them, sidewalks, green space. But that's the ultimate design to have like 60 feet of right-of-way with them.
Oh, okay. So we have some really old neighborhood collectors, you're probably aware.
Yep.
And I'm not sure these other neighborhood collectors, but one of the things that I'm aware of is you might have a neighborhood collector that's only 14 feet wide, and you're treating it the same way as one that has the correct space that you just described to us. And that is one of my concerns, because I don't know if anybody knows how wide a Suburban is. They're like...
About 6 to 7
They're
feet.
pretty wide. And so are a lot of the cars that we like to drive. So when you have a problem, when you have a, the road, we only have so much room for our roads. And then we've got these big cars. So one of my concerns is the way, if you look at these neighborhood collectors and consider them all to be the same, they may be categorically, but on the ground, they're not. So that was what I wanted to clarify.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I kind of had the same thought. That I know we classify them based on their traffic volumes and such, neighborhood collector versus residential, but to the people that drive them, what's the difference, really? It'd be one thing if all the neighborhood collectors had separated sidewalks and were wide, and to be sure, okay, well, there's like a functional difference to this street, but, we have, honestly, when you take a road like Twin Fir, which has absolutely not even a shoulder on it, it's wide, well, that's a collector, but now Douglas Circle is a neighborhood street, but it has the new sidewalk that we've put on it, so, you're actually like technically safer, but we would reduce this, And I also think that a lot of our, kind of looking at the map, a lot of our collectors and neighborhood streets are intertwined, so you'd be going sometimes from a 25 to a 20 back to a 25 zone, all within the same short drive, just based on the direction you're going, which when I think about this program, it is such like an education-based program. It's an awareness program to let people know you are in a neighborhood. There are people out, and we have posted the speed limit as low as we can possibly make it, because we really want you. At least that's what it tells me. When I'm like in a Portland neighborhood and I see, I'm like, oh, 20, like, okay, like, they're serious about it. And so from that point of view, I think the best thing we could do is have it be as consistent as possible on the drive, so it's not kind of a mixed message, like, well, what's going on here? Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 25. It's just 20, because ideally we just want people to be careful everywhere they're driving. Councilor Winlet.
A couple questions. Where would the money come from to pay for this if we implement it?
Street fund. Street
That
fund.
would be so we'd take
$145,000 out of the street fund and use it for these signs. That's where signs come from.
Okay. So we have plenty of money in that, I guess?
We never have plenty of money in the street fund. I would never ever say that we have plenty of money in the street fund. We have millions of dollars of unpaid for capital projects, but I mean, it's a council decision about priorities.
So don't you think people only go like 15 miles an hour with the way our road conditions are in some places? Just kidding. The other thing that I would like to know is, do you anticipate, Chief, let's ask Captain Simon, since he was the traffic czar, and came up from the traffic. So you're off the, since Captain Simon did an excellent presentation on all the statistics, I guess I would like to know from an enforcement standpoint of view, do you see, if this was implemented, would there be a change in our enforcement strategies? Or, in other words, are we going to dedicate more street officers to flip them over to traffic so that we would enforce this? Or is it going to be on the honor system where people just read the sign and figure they're not going to speed?
That's a great question. The chief won't let me convert everyone to motorcycle officers as much as I might try. But we would approach it just as we would with anything else. So education would obviously be huge on something like this, if that was to roll out across the city. We would communicate that to our officers, and we would say, hey, be proactive where you can, which is the same message that we tell our patrol officers now. We would say the same thing to our traffic unit, and they're going to respond many times as they would, just as they are now, by being complaint driven, right? So there's going to be some neighborhoods that are going to say, hey, look, I'm seeing this particular issue, regardless, so if it's a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, hey, it looks like they're going 35, can you come do some extra patrols? And we'll dedicate resources as we have them to go and attack those issues. And then where we can, we'll educate folks. Where we can't educate them, we'll enforce it. And then in some of those ways, we'll just collect data. We'll use a speed trailer. We'll use some of those things sometimes to grab that information to share with communities. The biggest thing that we see on the enforcement side, and Goodall's a great example, everyone that we contact, they live in that area. Every single one. It's not just people passing through. So education is paramount, right? Because that's where we're going to get the most bang for the buck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to say a couple, some feedback from the Transportation Advisory Board. I think they were hesitant to give any sort of an opinion because they didn't know whether the city had the money or not. I think that was one situation. But there were also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a number of engineering type thinkers, would you say, on our tab? And a lot of them did not see that there would be a change in behavior based on the statistics that we reviewed. I mean, it's almost statistically, I totally get the situation that you want everybody to follow the rules, but they didn't really see that implementing it would be a statistical difference of outcomes for crashes, injuries, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of their numbers background coming and saying, was there anything else that they really?
I think you covered most of their concerns, that they really wanted a measurable measurement of success on it. And they didn't think that we could get some sort of metric that we would be able to point at and say, yes, these signs are reducing the speed limit significantly enough and making the community safer for the investment. That Portland State study is the one that always sticks out. It's reducing the speeds by 1 mile an hour. And that's at 56% of the sites. Otherwise, things remain the same.
Isn't the big benefit, though, that it's bringing the higher speeds down?
It is bringing the faster speeds down. The people that are driving 10 miles and over the speed limit.
Yeah,
it is shifting them down.
Yeah.
And then the other part was that they felt a lot of the people that speed are not necessarily residents of Lake Oswego because they're no, would you let me finish? They see a lot of utility vehicles and a lot of worker vehicles and so on speeding fast. A lot of construction trucks speeding really fast. So that was the feedback that we got. Yes, everybody does speed, but I just want to make a point that that was also from the tab comments, so.
We don't care where they live.
You what?
We don't care on the streets where, yeah, it doesn't matter, just the speeders, you know.
Well, I guess my point is,
Understand that point.
educational efforts would have to be made in a much broader situation than our local residents, is my point.
It's a good point. Councilor Boop.
Yeah, I mean, if I am very selfish, I would say no, leave the thing, but I work with children and I know how significant it is, you know, to lower to 5. The kids are in the street, and if you drive by the schools at 8 o'clock, 7, you say reduced speed is 20 miles an hour. Why? Because they're children, but unfortunately, children, or fortunately, which is good, children are not only in the schools, they are also in their neighborhood. And, you know, I think for that reason, I think we should pursue this. I was really opposed to this, honestly, for many reasons. I did some research, and there's significant benefits of reducing the, you know, like environmentally, it's really very important. And, you know, also the accident will reduce the, like PSU say 1.5, we are going 5 miles. It means it's better. And I think, like you say, education, we tell people here, it's like in schools it flash, you know, there. And the good news or bad news for some people, it's $400 ticket if you go like cross those lines, and the police will catch you and you'll pay. So if I'm not saying we are going to do that because I will be in trouble. I kind of drive fast. But yeah, I mean, yeah. But it's good when you say 20 miles, it like does something to you. You say, oh, it's a neighborhood, there are children. And what is, if you go in all the neighborhood, the people, they put signs like drive if your children were here. So I think the city doing that, it's supporting the majority of our people. So I agree, we should do it. 145, it's worth, you know, what will, if in the long run, what you get from that, it's more than $1 million, it's more. So, and many parents will be very happy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. Councilor Corrigan.
So I want to say I really appreciate the work of the tab. It sounds like they did their due diligence and they looked at it very carefully. But I also believe that our job is to look at things from the 30,000-foot level. And we are addressing 2 different things here that really, I think, impact on this situation. Number one, more people than ever want to safely walk, roll, and ride in our community. And we can't afford all the pathways they want. One of the things we can do is slow down traffic on our roads and make it easier for them to share the roads where they have to. And there are a lot of places where they have to share the roads and they have to cross the roads. The other thing is that we're also facing increasing density. I mean, some of it's because we have a natural rate of growth, and others reason is because the thing we discussed tonight is we have to. And one of the things that does is, in my neighborhood, for instance, it adds more driveways to a neighborhood collector as the lots subdivide. And we know that we have increasing traffic just because we have more people living in our neighborhoods. And then again, we have the streets that aren't built for that. We have a lot of old streets, and those old streets can be collectors because that's kind of where things started. And I think, so that's why I would support doing it on neighborhood streets and on the neighborhood collectors.
Thank you, Councilor Corrigan. Councilor Burdick.
I completely agree with everything that Councilor Corrigan just said. I'd also just like to point out that by doing this, I think we have significantly more signs being placed on the road reminding people that you're in a 20-mile-an-hour versus right now. So depending on which direction, it looks like, you know, about 175 more signs just on the road to remind people, hey, you're in a 20-mile-an-hour. I think the other thing that we sometimes lose sight of is like, okay, there might have only been a couple serious injuries, but those serious injuries, I mean, that could take out someone's leg. I mean, and so how much is that worth? I mean, so I kind of look at this fee and I'm like, okay, even if we include the connectors, you know, 145,000 approximately, I realize that doesn't include the publicity, but I'm like, you know, for someone who might have a knee that's damaged all their life or something, and God forbid that we actually have a life loss, you know, if we have anything that we can do to reduce that. So we have tangible from that perspective, but we also have the intangible. It's scary how many people actually don't bother moving over and they're driving, you know, above the speed limit, especially when we get on these narrower streets. I mean, there's certain roads I won't walk on, even though there's like kind of somewhat of a bike lane, but I'm like, no way am I doing that. It's just, you don't feel safe. So if we can get especially those high speeders down in at least a little more reasonable range, I think it's worth it. And ideally, we get everyone down more than a mile or two and get them closer to, you know, maybe paying more attention, like, oh, there's that 20-mile-an-hour speed. Let's slow down a little bit. So I'm fully supportive of it. And thank you for all your work on this. I know it was a lot of trying to pull data, and it's hard when there's not a lot of data out there. But I also, final point, our neighbors to the north, west, and now our county have taken this on. So I don't think we're going to be, you know, I think we're keeping things consistent for drivers as well. So that might, I think, just kind of makes it easier so people aren't guessing.
That's true, too. Thank you, Councilor Burdick. Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. I echo what Councilor Corrigan and Councilor Burdick said. Copy exactly. Thank you very much for saying that. One suggestion I have is that we stay consistent, as you mentioned. We don't want to go 25 and then 20 and then 25 again, but 20. So as we go through the neighborhood, I suggest that we stay consistent with the 20. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. So am I hearing kind of a consensus around the full package, we will, the collector and the residential street for the consistency? Okay. Is there a way, do we have a law in Oregon that move over law? Is that in Oregon? Oh, we do. Maybe that could be part of it. I think some people think they can't cross the double yellow. And on Iron Mountain, I mean, where there's like tons of room, I see him just like hugging. It's like, what are you doing?
Iron
There's like
Mountain,
no one out.
you have a separated facility on Iron Mountain, so the driver does not have to move over, but you have to give 3 feet to a bicyclist or a pedestrian that you pass.
Yeah, it's just like
3 feet.
That could be a good
I
part.
think everyone needs to take their driver's test again.
I also, I mean, as a cyclist, as someone who rides nearly every single day, I can tell you most drivers are, well, not most, a substantial percentage of drivers are actually not looking at the road. So
Yeah,
I don't think it's that people are necessarily not moving over. It's that maybe they're looking at their
That's what I wonder
phones.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's always the first, car, and then the other ones, once one person does.
I sometimes feel like drivers swerve towards me, but
that's
I assume they're looking at their phones.
Is
Or it's John. No, I'm kidding.
another,
No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing you.
I don't drive slow in Lake Oswego.
Maybe as part of the educational effort or something, I mean, there's the signs that are in the neighborhoods that I know we've talked about before, the blue signs, the neighborhood traffic only signs. And I wonder if now is the time to kind of not get rid of them, but to convert them to like you're entering a neighborhood and kind of tie it into this kind of.
I think this is one, I think we've had some conversations about it. I think as those signs need to be replaced, we simply don't replace them. But we probably need to speak with the neighborhoods about it before we take any action, because I don't necessarily think we need to pick a fight with the neighborhoods. The way they're written, though, they're not very welcoming.
I think that's the point of it was to be more like you're in a neighborhood, to kind of.
I know, but in the long run, those signs have no regulatory force. So if you put up a sign that says you're entering a neighborhood, please drive slowly, that has no regulatory force. The 20 miles an hour, though, does have regulatory force. So I think we should probably focus on those places where we can help people be good neighbors as opposed to focusing on the places where we just make people feel better. If that makes sense, we need to think about where can we have the tangible result. I personally find those signs to be not consistent with your welcoming and inclusive message.
They're horrible.
Yeah.
this is local traffic only. I mean, that's, you know.
Well, and I think it's to try to avoid having folks cut through, and I appreciate that. If you live on E or you live on B or C, you really don't want folks cutting through. There's other parts of town where that's also the case. Key Lock, it's another place where you see that sign. Folks use it as a cut through. I understand why, if you live on those streets, you're not happy about folks. I don't think it prevents cut through behavior, though. I think you're probably on the right track in terms of how do you lower speeds so that people who do choose to cut through find it extremely inconvenient. I mean, I think that's a better strategy, is make it inconvenient to cut through.
Well, we just better, if we, one thing I would love to hear the feedback from the neighborhood chairs associations to maybe get some neighborhood on how we can get neighbors and get the word out and educational part.
It's great.
But I just hope people realize, though, that when this comes in, because last 6 or 7 years that I've been on council, I mean, some of the choke points, or I won't say choke points, the speed points are the ones that we've gotten a lot of emails on. And, you know, they demand that our police department is there 24/7, you know, to catch everybody. And I just want the expectations that the police department is not big enough to do this. And I don't want to give a false, I guess, expectation of our community that all of a sudden now we're going to be, you know, increasing patrols to where we're going to be stopping all these people. It's going to be, we have the same number of officers that we have. So anyway.
I share that concern.
So, I mean, we will probably get more emails, and you're going to get a lot more low-com complaints and so on. So
Good news, every new car I've gotten now tells me what the speed limit is on the street.
true.
And
That's
so maybe this will help with just inside the car behavior. So
What is the program that every car knows exactly where the sign is, and it changes that speed? as soon
I
as
wish
you
I
go
knew
outside?
about auto technology. I'm sure it's some
Speed zone
GPS.
orders have the GPS
It's
location.
GPS.
or
But you
the-
put the sign in the GPS.
Well, yeah, that they have like a latitude and longitude location of where that sign's posted.
Because you put it in the like GIS.
Well, your map programs know where those signs are from that.
Because we put them in.
Well, the state, remember, the state controls the speed limits and mostly where
tell
they're
them.
posted when speed zone orders are put in.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Okay, so you have the information you need from us?
Yep.
Come back with the ordinance? It won't take another year.
Remember, engineering is short-staffed, and so I try to be realistic about how fast we can get back. But I think the goal is to get it done probably by the time, I would say, if we could get it done by the time school starts in the fall, that might be a good target goal for us. It's also kind of a busy time of year for construction projects, if you haven't noticed, so.
we make our own signs, right? Yes.
Go ahead, Erica.
Talked already.
Thank you. Mayor, councilors, thank you. That's 175 signs? How many was it?
It was,
Sorry.
yeah.
Can we go back to that?
We're doing the neighborhood collectors.
The whole thing?
Remember, the replacement
Yeah.
is also new signs, so you're looking at about 400, 350.
It'll take a while.
I don't think I can guarantee by
school.
school start. That's a lot of manpower or staff effort to do all of that, 450 signs, between now and then, both to make them and install them. Plus, I think we also need to come up with a game plan about the education and outreach piece. So we can come back with the ordinance.
We can get the ordinance in place
That's
and
pretty
start
easy, if
rolling the
that's the part you
project
want.
out.
Yeah, but
and
I'd like
start
to-
posting the signs.
I'd like to come up with a bit of a timeline to
Yeah,
Once
so
you
I was
pass
just
the
asking about
ordinance,
the
do we have to put the signs up all at once, or can they do like automatic water meters where we roll them out as they're done?
We could roll them out by.
Like
basically-
neighborhood by neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So
the
that's what we're
ordinance
gonna
is-
do.
Yeah, the ordinance
what
is
we're gonna do.
passed, lets us use the program, and then
Right.
whatever sign we post, when we post a road, it becomes 20.
I just think we want to think about not just posting a road, but post a neighborhood, a general area.
right.
But I think if we can do that, then we can talk about where the priority areas might be.
It gives us time to put the communications plan together,
Yeah,
too.
we need a little bit of that. I mean, it's April 15th today. Yeah, so that's, school will be here next week. Don't they start in August? So, yeah, I think a little bit of time. We want to get the ordinance in place so that we have the authority to do that. So that'd be good. We'd be back here in a month for that. And then that puts us into May already, and then to make 500 signs and install them is going to be, or deal with 500 signs. Because believe it or not, somebody mentioned it too, it's not just go out there and post a new sign, you have to actually do utility locates for them. That does take some time as well.
Yeah.
So give us a little time to come up with a strategy, and we'll bring that back when we bring the ordinance.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for all your work on this too. The maps were great. I know you had to go through, and it's a lot of work. Put them in here. Thank you. Thank you, Erica. Thank you. Well, thank you both.
Now, Will, can you give up the whole traffic thing now? Can you just be the assistant city engineer?
Never quite.
All right, we're back on.
Yeah.
I'll note that we are back on time here. Information from council. Anyone have anything? No?
All right, go ahead.
Oh, Council Burdick.
I just wanted to do a shout out to our Library Advisory Board. Our youth on there are fantastic, and they've been doing a survey to get feedback from other high school students and junior high students about the library and what their needs are. And they've already had like 350, 400 responses, something like that. So just really, they've just jumped in with 2 feet and are doing amazing work. So I just wanted to do a shout out to them.
Thank you for sharing that.
They're very passionate too. It's really great. Yeah. So this afternoon, we issued some park rules for the steps. I emailed them to all of you, but I just want to make sure we go over them really briefly on camera. They're going to go to the media today, so you'll probably see a Lake Oswego Review article as soon as Corey writes it. And I will say the challenge of this is how to, and Ivan's here and George is here to answer any questions you might have. This is only the park rules, so some of the questions you're getting about Marine Board regulations or enforcement, those are not addressed here. We are still working on those issues. The other thing before I go over them, in your resolution 25-18, you directed the city manager to come back in September. And so in September, we'll also go over how did these rules actually work, and do we need to make any adjustments to them as a result? The balancing test here was how do we make sure we comply with the judge's order, which meant on the one hand, access as defined basically by the trial, and Ellen can talk about that more, but also sort of that objectively reasonable test, which I still find kind of baffling because I don't think there is such a thing as objectively reasonable, but that's just me. But in terms of like, what would 12 people randomly pulled off the streets, would they say, yeah, this seems like it makes sense to me? So some very common sense approaches to the whole deal. There's some new definitions added because there's some stuff we prohibited that we haven't had to prohibit in the past because we didn't allow access from our parks. So like there's a new definition of a kiteboard and of what a motor means. And actually I would say probably one of the things we're gonna see having to step up a little bit on right now is the Marine Board doesn't define trolling motors as motors, but we believe it's unsafe to drop a motor on those steps. We think somebody's gonna get hurt and the steps are gonna get damaged, even if it's a trolling motor. And then personal watercraft, which is like jet skis and hydrofoils and those things are also defined. We've never had to define those before. Kind of fun. So essentially Ellen can talk about the structure of this. We amended the existing rule that used to apply to Sunderleaf as a park to only apply to Sunderleaf and Headley. Let me say this out loud, because I know you got some emails about this. The rules have not changed at Sunderleaf or Headley. You are still not allowed to jump over the fence at Headley Walkway. And anyone who sees somebody jumping over that fence could call our non-emergency dispatch number. Now, it's the non-emergency, so we might not be there in 5 minutes, but we'll come talk to those folks. You also still can't fish off of any of our bridges, just so you know, none of those rules have changed. So there's a new section added, and here's what the new section says. You can't land, launch, or retrieve or dock a motorboat, a sailboat, a sailboard, a personal watercraft, a kiteboard, or a non-Coast Guard approved floating device from the steps. So only non-motorized vessels, only swimmers, and Coast Guard approved inflatables can go in on the steps. Second, you can only go in on the steps. Can't go in on the muddy bank. Can't jump or dive, which should be obvious, but But that's why it's there, is it should be, I believe an objectively reasonable regulation that you should not dive into the lake from there. 18 feet is the boat length. And we did that based on feedback we got about the average size of kayaks, including 2-people kayaks. You can't leave your stuff in Lower Millennium. If you leave your stuff, we're going to come take it.
What do you mean stuff?
Like, so if your boat came across the street on a trailer, you can't leave your trailer there while you're out on the lake. The idea is no more than 1 hour before sunrise and no more than 1 hour after sunset, because I do think that it's objectively reasonable to say kayaking on the lake after dark is not a safe activity.
Went over the falls at 11 p.m.
Also, frankly, the steps themselves are not safe after dark. So regardless of what's happening on the lake, the steps themselves are not safe after dark. We can close the steps if we need to. So if there's an event that's happening on the lake, like periodically there's a rowing event, sometimes there are water skiing events, sometimes there are fireworks on the 4th of July. So we're giving ourselves the right to say, in those cases, that you can't launch or swim.
With those cases, will we put just like a little rope or something?
That's an Ivan question. We'll somehow block them off.
Like a Velcro.
Or a sign that says like access closed or something.
Again, I haven't dealt with any of the operational side of how we're going to actually deal with this, but
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, so what we traditionally do when we close parks is we sign them, and so we have portable A-frames that we bring in, and then we cite that they're closed. We cite reference back to the resolution of the rule that allows us to do that, purpose and time. So, and then what we do with our ranger program and also with our partners in the police department, we make everybody aware that those areas are closed for this purpose and for this time period.
the next one is that you shouldn't get in just to violate Marine Board rules, which also seems kind of common-sensy to me. If you're going to swim, we want you to have a swim buoy. I expected, well, anyway, I expect most people who don't want to do that will go swim at some other spot. And then last but not least, we are directing folks back to the Marine Board to figure out what kind of registration or permit they need, as opposed to us deciding what they needed. We're basically saying you have to have your Marine Board ducks in a row. So that's what it is. Questions?
Great.
Okay.
Now, what's the plan for them to kind of communicate these rules?
So we'll be posting them on the website tonight, I believe, and then we'll do outreach to the Lake Corps, the state of Oregon, and to the parties. I believe Ivan told me that we'll be signing the park, and the sign should be up by the end of the week. Ivan, will the sign be bigger?
Will it have every single one of these things?
Like
It'll probably have, yeah.
4 pages of small
B
type.
through J, it'll probably have all those things for now. It'll probably have all those things for now, yes.
And Mayor and Council, I will say, Ivan helpfully, our director helpfully created sort of a bullet point, a framework that, and then I converted that framework into legal language. So I actually would expect that bullet points will probably be.
And you know that the Parks Department's gotten really good actually too of also having images and graphics so that it'll hopefully have some of that.
Yes, and the signs will be bigger. The Marine Board sign with a very small text that you have to stand in the water to read will be enlarged. Those are temporary signs. And now that we have rules that are adopted, we're going to put up temporary signs that have the bullet points for the rules of entering, the new rules for the park. That'll also be in a temporary, but we are ordering permanent signs, and we are adjusting the text on the Marine Board sign that is currently there. And then this sign will be very consistent with our other park rule signs.
Okay. And I mean, the biggest thing we're seeing is the motors on the boats.
Yeah, we're seeing some fisher folks who have mostly trolling motors. We did see one larger motor, but I don't expect you're going to see a lot of that because it's really heavy and difficult to carry across. But I would say the trolling motors are probably the thing. I would say that the biggest feedback we've gotten so far has been about the people who are fishing. And it's their behavior on the lake that is more concerning than the behavior of what's happening at the launch point. So we're obviously working with the Marine Board, Fish and Wildlife, Sheriff's Office, Lake Corps on the behavior on the lake, some of which can be regulated, some of which can't be. Probably the biggest complaint I've had is folks fishing very close to someone's house, if not fishing underneath someone's house. And unfortunately, what I've come to understand is the same thing we've come to understand about our floodplain regulations. Remember our floodplain regulations a few years ago, we had this big controversy because Oswego Lake is the only lake that FEMA regulates where people can have foundations for their boathouses. Usually boathouses float. And so all of the fishing regulations related to fishing around structures are not, they're not contemplating the situation that presents on Oswego Lake.
What should someone do if they see someone with a trolling motor on the lake? Could they call the
They
non-emergency?
should call the non-emergency number, and then we'll have to send someone down to Millennium Plaza Park and talk with them when they come out. We won't be able to talk with them while they're on the water.
Because my guess is if folks fishing on a river, like that's a common piece of equipment they would have on their boat, and then they're just bringing the boat they use on the river to the lake, and they don't, obviously these rules haven't been in place, or not even in place right now, that, because we've heard that.
Yeah, we haven't done any outreach, I don't think, yet to the folks who are fishing. I mean, that's the obvious thing I think we could do is just talk to them and say, what kind of equipment are you using? Why are you using it? Again, during the trial, the conversation was all about stand-up paddleboarding, swimming, and kayaking. It wasn't about fishing.
Yeah.
And so I'm not positive that when we entered this brave new world that we had the volume of fisher people that we've seen in our heads. So.
Would have known.
And I would add, when we're talking about motorized and City Manager Bennett is correct, the Marine Board does not distinguish a trolling motor as a motor. It's an internal combustion motor is their definition. The issue that we have from a parks rule perspective is that about 28 feet from the top of the stairs, we have an interactive fountain that we encourage children to come in. And from a safety standpoint, we don't want to see the introduction of a motorized blade being permitted regardless of what it is. So we will have a dialogue with the fishermen. I can also state from my experience of a sit-on-top kayak with a trolling motors are designed for easy access to remove. So they're not permanently mounted to the boat generally. They generally have a clamp that has a screw that will release it from the boat. And it can be left in your vehicle.
Yeah, so you can still use the lake without using the kayak.
You can still use the kayak without it.
Yeah, of course. That's great. Councilor Corrigan.
Yeah, so my question was, so the concern we're hearing about, zebra mussels and quagga mussels, that must be an Oregon State Marine Board issue. We don't have to go there.
We can't go there. Not in terms of access from the steps.
Okay.
Right, in terms of, remember, this first pass was just what do we need to do to make access as safe as possible?
But I will say, President Corrigan, that's one of the reasons why, and I always hate to disagree with my two smartest people here, but the definition of motorboat we took directly from state law, and it actually does include trolling motors, regardless of whether or not they're intact, operational. We framed the issue of a motorboat as being a boat plus a motor. So our regulations are consistent with state law, which prohibit anyone from taking a boat and a trolling motor through our access point. And I think that many members of the public probably just aren't aware of that yet. So we're definitely going to educate people, but it is consistent with state law. We haven't expanded state law in any way. A motorized motorboat is the term, includes a trolling motor when it is with a boat. And that's what we're seeing is people bringing even trolling motors separate from their boats. And so I only bring that up in response to your question President Corrigan, because it's the motorized boats that are of the most concern in state regulations, because and trolling motors probably are a lesser concern, but that's the concern around invasives, is the ability of motors to keep some kind of liquid in their system, and that's what conveys the invasive aquatics.
So what can you put on a lake? Tell me what kind of vessel.
Kayak, stand-up paddleboard,
Canoe?
canoe.
Period.
A Coast Guard approved inflatable.
And any watercraft has to be 18 inches or less.
No, 18 feet.
18 feet.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
You could basically put a gigantic flotation.
If it's Coast Guard certified, which most of them are not.
Most of what?
Inflatables. So like your inner
like a
tubes, your giant
raft.
floating swans, those are not Coast Guard certified. They can't go on.
No motor, like clear.
No motor.
Although the floating swans would be
They look
nice.
really great in Bend when I've seen them
Very
floating
classy.
down the Deschutes.
I think that would change everyone's perception. It just looks so
But they are not Coast Guard. I think we are actually
Maybe
concerned
golden.
about folks out there just floating around in inner tubes, so.
So the basket guy is like.
The basket guy could go out if he's got whatever approved permits there are from the State Marine Board for the vessel. I don't want to get into regulating whether that's a permitted vessel or not.
Who the heck knows?
If it's less than 18 feet and he's got a state whatever he needs, then he can put it in. If he's,
So like a large raft that they take down the Colorado River that is approved?
Oh, like a white round.
yeah, I mean, if it's less than 18 feet long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only propelled with an oar. I doubt, the ones that go down the Colorado are significantly bigger than that. Most of them have motors, but
Yeah.
A rafting you might put on the Deschutes with you and your spouse. It would be the most boring row you've ever had, and it would be the wrong vehicle for that waterway. But yes, you could put it on the water. Again, our goal was to make sure that we were being objectively reasonable. Like, if I pulled 12 people off the street and said, do you think this is safe to launch from the steps? And remember, the safety issue in this case is not about the body of water. The safety issue is the steps. And so if you, as a common person, looked at it and said, yeah, okay, I could see that, that was the goal. I realize not everybody's going to agree.
Really?
So again, I know, especially on this issue, there's never been a disagreement on this issue. But again, the other thing is that because you directed us to come back to you in September, we'll have a chance to say, what happened this summer? What did we see? How did it work? And that, as I said at the beginning, Ivan and I are working on an operational plan that goes with it, because we'll need a staffing plan and some other stuff, some other information campaign needs to happen. So that's happening, but this had to happen first under the resolution. So we're moving because we know summer's on its way. Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
the work getting this together in such short time.
Yeah.
It's very good. Thank you. Thanks, Ivan. Okay, anything else? All good? All right, we are
Are we
adjourned.
still on schedule to open up on the 26th? Lorac?